Hello, everybody. Happy Wednesday. What's going on? Welcome, welcome. Let me go ahead and mute the other audio of the computer for right now, so you should only be able to hear me. The microphone should be working. So we got a couple things to cover today for announcements. We're gonna let some people trickle in as we go, but a couple quick things. First of all, I get the camera rather lowered down a little bit, so the framing is me a little bit more on top of the frame. I know that bugs a couple people, so that's fixed. And I set up the little pop filter on top of my microphone here, so that should help with the pops. The earlier, I guess late last week, I was in the process of recording a tutorial with a special guest that we're going to be talking about when that's getting closer to getting released. And we were on a call, preparing and working on the tutorial for like 6.5 hours. So I had to edit 6.5 hours worth of content down to about 2 hours. So that's going to be a big one. So I spent a lot of time editing and cleaning up, and I got to like really be listening intently on all of the audio and everything. I could hear some of the pop speaking, so I was like, I think I already own a pop filter. So there we go, we got that set. The volume is turned down a little bit more. Hopefully, it's peaking less. So if it's coming through okay, then give me a heads up. That'd be good to know. Actually, if there's any problems. In the meantime, let's jump into the chat and say hello to some people, and then we'll get some more announcements going. I want more people around. Grant. Burns, what's going on? Harvard, Yadaglow, Terry, Laserface the third, what's going on? Shook, what's happening? Sean, MW Stands, thank you guys for hanging out. We got lots of people actually in here hanging out. We got Elf and Make Motion, what's going on? Mumphies, Level Bevel, welcome, welcome. Paul, hanging out as always. Dennis, Scott, what's going on? Apple by 3D. That seems like a new name. I don't recognize that specifically. Another quick thing is Scott has my phone number. So in case Crossfader is not around, able to message, and Yalaglow, if they're not around, then Scott is now also watching it. So in case there's some weird audio, or I don't switch the screen, or I'm just not noticing something important in the chat, they can text me and I'll have that buzz and that'll pop up for me right away. So that is also good. What's going on? Pro Tools, Junior Clarky, what's happening? Bosnian, hello, hello. Apple says they've been hanging out on the Slack, but this is the first live one, so welcome. Okay, so quick recap. One Man Short, what's going on? Hey, thanks everybody for coming and hanging out and helping ask questions. It's really exciting. So we got lots of people in here. Why don't we get some more of the announcements going? I can show a couple little things. Meeks, what's going on? Okay, firstly, I want to save that for more of the, well, I guess it's still before it. I guess it's still as people are going in. But I wanted to get some other people's eyeballs on an animation I've been working on for kind of my Patreon setup. So this is really just about the animation, but I guess it doubles as a little advertisement to you guys too. So I've got a Patreon set up for Rocket Lasso, of course. And I've been doing a bunch of, I was doing this animation trying to get ready for the tutorial that's coming out. And I just want to run it by everyone here. So let me make sure that the audio is going to play. Let's switch to the proper screen. Screen and mic. Okay, I'm going to turn on the audio here and we're going to play. So this is just playing in the viewport right now, so it runs really quick. I guess the end might be a little bit laggy when the particles start, but it's just really straightforward. I just want to get some other eyeballs on it. And then I'll start putting this. I'm going to put this up on Patreon, but here's a little animation, so I'm going to hit play. There we go. It gets a little laggy and choppy there at the end when all the particles are flying. But that should pretty much be that. Might make a couple tweaks, been getting a couple opinions and make some changes. And it's all chunky at the end there when it's flying in an angle, but it's really actually quite smooth on the real rendered version. But that should be fun. It's very much... Yeah, Elf is asking why do something like this in cinema instead of AE, and it's mostly that I know cinema really well, and I was able to put a majority of that together in a couple hours one evening. In After Effects, I'd be pretty lost, and if it's in cinema and whatnot, then I can share the scene file and learn additional techniques. And I actually making a very clean rig in which it was very simple to make transitions and change animations and setups in there was really fun. So I'm thoroughly enjoy doing that, and it's really easy to introduce some 3D elements when it's time to do it. But yeah, definitely, most of that could have been pretty trivially. It would have been pretty trivial to do that in After Effects, but I thought it'd be fun. Okay, so it looks like we got lots of people hanging out, ready to go. Hadley's in here too. Scotty, Crossfader is here, of course. Made it just in time. Okay, so last announcement before we get going with questions. And by the way, everybody start getting questions together. Is it calling you Elf is confusing you? You don't get it often. I just do the shortened version because I'm so bad at pronouncing the names. Like there's Leo, but that might be not Leo, but Umbrella. I'm gonna shorten it to the one I can pronounce. So in any case, one more announcement on the Slack channel, and let me actually go ahead and pop this up. If you guys aren't already on it, let's go and pop this up on the Rocket Lasso Slack channel, which we got right here. If you're not already on the Rocket Lasso Slack, there's a free Slack, and you can get to it by going to Rocket Lasso Slack, all one word, .com, and you can go and see all the stuff. And there's lots of different channels, but there is a brand new challenge that is out right now. So if you're already on Slack, make sure you jump into the challenges channel here. You can go find it if you're not already there by clicking on the channels and finding challenges. But there's a really cool challenge right now where they are focused on, I don't know what the original artist is. It might be, okay, Eric on Instagram. So at least his name is Eric. Space Goose, where he goes and he takes real life objects and will reimagine them as a spaceship, mostly sci-fi vehicles. And man, they are so freaking cool. So the theme for this upcoming challenge is going to be something along these lines. So it's about finding an object and then doing a sketch and then making it into some sort of other vehicle, presumably. So definitely go and check that out. I definitely want to be promoting all the cool projects that are happening on the Rocket Lasso Slack, and this is the first big one since we kind of swapped it over. Boom. Yeah, so there is that. Make sure you come and hang out if you're not already there. Let me pop this up, get the chat window correctly reoriented, and we will be ready to start properly here. There's the chat. All right, so you guys should already know the rules, but if you're new, make sure that let me go and up here. Mostly I answer questions via links, but it could just be a question. Type out a question. I love the typed out ones because then we don't have to worry about getting specific credit or anything. Make sure you put the word question kind of just big and bold. I don't think there's any specific way to do it, but just make it so it would pop out to me. Otherwise, it is links usually to animations or even photos. I love working from photos sometimes. But just make sure I can see the artist or the studio who made it. Otherwise, we will not tackle the question. And if it's a video, make sure you call out the very specific effect or the time code in which the effect is, because most things have a bunch of cool different elements to it, and we can't possibly tackle all of them. Plus, we always want to make our version of it, not just recreate what they have, but kind of take the core concept and do a fancy version of it. In any case, I think we are ready to start properly, so I'm going to switch to the other screen and then come in with a proper hello, and this all gets chopped off on YouTube. This is just the hanging out with the chat part. So everybody's starting to get their questions, which is awesome. All right, I'll be back in just a moment, and see you on the other side. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Rocket Lasso Live. It is Wednesday, and we are here to answer your Cinema 4D questions and your motion graphics questions, and who knows, maybe some Photoshop questions. I don't know. In fact, there's some new quirks in Photoshop that I've been really getting tripped up. In any case, I think we got a whole bunch of questions already lined up here. People are whipping questions out, so you've been gathering them all week. Thank you so much, everybody. Meeks is asking if we've tried doing melting plastics with R20 fields. Let's see what we got here. Go ahead and click on this link, mute the audio. So what do we got? We are on YouTube. Ooh, look at this. Macro War from Macro Room. Oh, and Macro Room is a really cool YouTube channel. I've watched their stuff before where they do videos of super zoomed in things. So this looks like, yeah, things, these are plastics. This is, I think Macro Room is all real. So this is real footage of these objects melting, probably due to a heat gun or a heat lamp, or they're inside of an oven or a toaster, so you can see that they're burning. Yeah, it's really cool. Melting, blobbing. Well, that's super crazy. I mean, we can totally try and do something here. There's a lot of different parts to it, so, but there's also kind of a time lapse to it, time lapse as well, so it could be kind of fun. So I love these photo-based references. So let's go ahead and also this is going to be a little bit of a rapid fire. I'm trying to get through lots of questions. So let's see how quickly we can make something along these lines without spending too much time. So actually, let's keep it pretty basic. We've got our, actually, why don't we go ahead and open up our giraffe model? We don't use that too often. So if I go ahead over here to episode 8, but we go back to season 1, maybe even live shows, models. We've got our giraffe model that we got. So let's open up our giraffe. So there's our cute little giraffe. But we are going to be taking this giraffe. We don't need the material, just using the giraffe. And let's see if we can melt our giraffe here. So obviously, well, one of the very first things that we're going to do is put this entire thing into a volume. We might do a slightly low resolution volume because we need to run pretty quick. But in any case, let's go ahead and build ourselves a volume builder and throw in our giraffe. And boom, he gets all pixelated. These are little two-dimensional cards representing our overall resolution. I'm going to drop it down to 10. Now you can see we've got a decent amount of information for our giraffe. Let's go ahead and build a mesher so we can see what this geometry actually looks like. You see we got our giraffe. He's looking kind of lumpy. I think we go a little bit higher here. Let's jump it up to 5, which doubles the resolution. We could go up to 2. And actually, you see the way this is behaving? It's not behaving the way I expected it to. So what that tells me is this giraffe has a hole in it. There's a hole in here. This is not a watertight giraffe. So the first thing to do is select any polygon and hit UW, and we can right away see that these eyeballs are not actually a closed hole, and it's actually the same with this ear. This ear is not a closed volume either. There could be other places as well. The feet seem fine. The butt seems fine. So it seems like the ears, the eyes, probably the mouth, but not necessarily. Let's find out. I'm going to grab a couple selections here. It seems like actually, strangely, of all the things they left disconnected, the mouth is indeed still connected. A little bit odd, but let's go ahead and do some quick cleanup here. I don't want to lose the eyeball, so let's select the eyeballs. I'm going to hit UWUP, which splits those out to a separate object, and we don't need to see those right now. And actually, no, the eyes are sealed. So that part is fine, but it does seem like the ears have a hole traveling right through it. So let's see. Did they actually model the inside and outside of the ear? I hope so. Let's see if we can go inside here carefully. I'm going to select a particular polygon. Let's rotate around that one. I guess selecting it doesn't really change anything. There's one of the eyes. There's one of the ears here. And yeah, they did model the inside and outside, so I just hit MD, which is just closed polygon hole. There we go. We close that hole. And then we should be able to just go to this outside of this ear and also close the polygon hole. And now these two should both be volumes. So with any luck, we're not going to get this kind of skin effect. Yeah, okay, so right away, do you see how we're getting a lot more definition? The way we could tell that that was happening, in fact, let me talk through that because it's kind of important. If there's a hole in our model, it does not hold water, so it can't fill it up as a volume. If it's not filling up as a volume, it's just treating it like it's a skin. And if it's treating it like it's a skin, we actually have to go into our volume mesher and start giving it a voxel range threshold, so it actually starts increasing. But in this case, it's actually kind of got an inside skin and an outside skin. And you can see if we go to this hole, that there's kind of like an inside and an outside. So that's important to note. In any case, we can go ahead and undo. Now it is a waterproof giraffe, which means it's doing a way better job of creating this volume. And we are potentially able to clean it up a little bit. Now, once again, it goes to the volume overall. Like, we'd have to start shrinking this pretty thin to start getting this ear to appear, just it's because that ear is so dang thin. So I didn't want to spend too long doing cleanup here, but this is some good volume information, hopefully. So let's go ahead and see if there's a little bit of cleanup we can do. I'm going to select all. Let's go ahead and right click and say untriangulate, which should hopefully, actually, I'm going to untriangulate. Let's go higher here. And I don't want to create n-gons, but I want the angles to be pretty big. So that should hopefully mostly make quads. I don't expect it to be perfect, but you do a pretty good job. And yeah, you definitely see how it messed up on some of these corners up here. But I guess a basic idea here actually might be, even if we feed this into the volume, and this is way too, I don't want to go to that resolution, but if we go to something like this, what we could do is grab the displacer, if we want to make it parametric, and put that in the giraffe and put in a color shader. And what it's going to do is inflate our giraffe. Let's go ahead and show you what's happening here. If I drag our strength slider, it's actually going to inflate the overall surface everywhere. And you can see it's doing a pretty good job of inflating that. As it inflates, you can see that the volume actually has something to see now. So now, instead of cranking up my resolution, I just made everything a little bit thicker, and now the ears are successfully being generated. So actually, if we could jump this up even higher, even going to 3, and I just like that because it's going to run quicker for us, that's actually working pretty well. And we can tick up the percentage of strength here a little bit, and you can just see, like, yeah, it is filling out the form there. So that is working pretty well. You are seeing some we can see some polygons emerging on the surface here. So if we wanted to, this entire giraffe could actually be put into a subdivision surface before it goes into our our volume builder. And this doesn't need to be too subdivided. So you can just go 1, 1, and then you can see with and without, you can kind of see the polygons are going away. So in any case, we've now got a pretty nice volume giraffe going on here. So with this giraffe being made a lot smoother, the very first thing that we could do, if we want to start doing a melting effect, in theory, this is like the sharp version. You can see there's lots of detail. Now, of course, we can crank it up, but let's continue from here. Now, I'm going to use a smoothing deformer. I'm going to put this under the the volume mesher. And it's in the same level of the volume builder, which means all of this geometry is being created. Let me try to start that sentence again. We've got a volume mesher, which is generating the geometry. So the smoothing is a deformer as a child. So it's fine for it to be a child. Alternatively, we could have put it into a group, and in that group, put the smoothing. Same difference, but it's just we can just keep everything a little bit cleaner. We don't need the null. Now, I have made a smoothing deformer. And by controlling the stiffness here, we can actually say how much it's going to smooth the giraffe. So if we say zero stiffness, but lots of these iterations, we can actually get it, getting quite skinny, and a lot of the details are going to be getting removed. Now, a reason to use the stiffness is actually incredibly fast. You see, this is running really quick. As an alternative, we don't need to use stiffness. We could go into our volume builder and use a smoothing layer. Now, the problem with there's some advantages and disadvantages. The smoothing layer, on one hand, is really good because you'll actually see it's doing a great job of like melting some of these additional details away. And we're not getting those sharp points like we were getting from the smoothing deformer. But this takes a lot longer to calculate. Now, we're on such a low kind of poly mesh. This is working pretty well. I'm kind of impressed. It's working pretty well. So this might be the way to go in this particular instance, but it's not necessarily always the way to go. But this is regenerating a new mesh every time we pull it in. So that honestly, this is a big part of the initial part of this animation would be doing some smoothing on it. And we'll see about generating some particle stuff on the surface in a little bit. What I would think is we'd want to start animate the strength going up, so all the details are going to melt away. But you see that the feet actually start disappearing and traveling upward. It'd be kind of neat. Everything was kind of melting downward. There's potentially ways we could do that, but a lot more advanced than we can do for especially some sort of quick fire answer for this episode. But let's go ahead and let me think. Yeah, so I guess what I was going to say is as we increase the strength here, we want to maintain the volume. So let's go ahead and record this at the time of 0, and we'll go all the way up to frame 90, and we'll animate up to 100. But at the same time that that's happened, I think I would want to be inflating the giraffe even more. That way, we're maintaining the volume. Now we're just kind of eyeballing it. But let's say at the beginning, it's already inflated to 11, so that becomes our starting point. But if we go to the end, it's kind of melted. But if we start increasing our strength here, it's going to be inflating the giraffe some more. So it's almost like those the parts that we're losing volume are increasing the volume of the parts that they're melting into. So let's see, if we scrub through here, you see that we're losing definition, but we're not losing volume so much. Now we do lose the giraffe's feet at the bottom. That's going to be something of a problem. Something I was going to say is we could probably just make this a dynamic object, and while it's a little weird, it could probably be falling to the ground. Still potentially has something, but with the feet disconnecting the way they are, we'd probably have to modify that slightly differently. Along those lines, I am curious how well that would work dynamics-wise, so let's go ahead and test it. I'm going to make a floor. And actually the floor right there is fine. And let's just go ahead and make both of these dynamic objects. Simulation, rigid body, rigid body. I'm going to say, we can even leave it on automatic. I'm just curious what that will do. And let's go ahead and give this a very quick save into episode 8. Scene files. Melting plastic. Number 1. All right. I'm curious how the dynamics handle this, so I'm just going to very carefully frame forward. I want to see what it does. It's not freaking out. I'm not entirely sure what will happen. It might be not able to handle it, but let's just hit play and see if anything interesting happens. It's moving, so that's implying that something's sort of working. And then if the feet disappear, then it should fall to the ground suddenly. Hey, it works. I'm kind of surprised. So it's almost, so that is indeed working. One of the slight problems is that nothing is really melting downward. It's not going to blob down. Having said that, there's a lot of layers to this because there's a lot we could do. I'm making this dynamic, but we could have instead made the actual low poly mesh dynamic and made it soft bodies and had that start melting downward, and like deflating it is potentially something we can do. It is pretty low poly, so let's go ahead and do a quick test. I'm going to say this is soft body, and I'm going to say don't worry about self collisions, which makes it run really fast. It can pass through itself, but because we're putting it into a volume builder, that's completely fine. So I think the hope would be actually with that being a soft body like that, I think it might just automatically work and it might run pretty well. So it is just kind of falling away. But that's because it's dynamic and it might not, like the volumes might not like it being dynamic. So why don't we just take a look at what the dynamics are doing by itself. And you see, boom, it's just melting into the ground and then going, floop, it's just melting away, which is pretty great. I like that. So there's ways we might be able to combat that. Unfortunately, well, we do have stiffness, and we could put a vertex map in there. So if we were to make this a stiffness of 10, then it pretty much shouldn't fall. It should, well, okay, it is still falling. I guess that's just too weak down there for stiffness to really care that much. You can see now it sort of did, but it's very front heavy, so it's still falling over. Let's go to our follow rotation. I'm going to give it a little bit of follow rotation, so hopefully it doesn't fall over. Okay, now it's just standing on its front legs, which is hilarious. In any case, I don't want to worry about that part too much. I mean, potentially we could keep on cranking the stiffness up more and more. I'm going to put a lot of damping in there, and I don't think that's going to make too much of a difference, but yeah, it's still falling down. We could do a 1,000 for the stiffness. But you see, at a certain point, we get diminishing returns. I mean, now it's not falling away, but it is a very staticky kind of foot. So I guess a smart thing would be to make a low poly mesh of it. This is going down a very detailed path here, which is something I was somewhat trying to avoid. But there's a lot of interesting techniques here that I'd be curious about pursuing a bit. So let me like one thought would be if we were to copy this mesh and go ahead and do our subdivision on it, and if we go and we make this a very low poly mesh, and we could probably inflate it a decent amount. I'm going to kill this keyframe because it's a copy. Let's hide the original. If we inflate this some more, and then, this is going to be weird, but if we make a cube and get T for scale and scale it here. If we kind of fill in the legs here, we can put a big volume down there, something it can maintain. And T for scale, I'm going to scale it not on Y, so we can scale this in, get the legs captured, grab the top, scale it in there, grow my selection, invert my selection, shrink this in. So you see we're just kind of capturing some of the volume around the rest of this giraffe. And if we put this into our volume, yeah, there we go. So this is going to make it this mesh a lot more substantial, so it has something to calculate. Let's go ahead and grab this bottom one and pull it up. There we go. Pretty good. If we put this into our volume as well, then you see it's going to stiffen. It's going to fill in those parts of the giraffe. And yeah, actually, that's pretty good. If I put that there, does it? Yeah, it's going to subdivide. Don't want that. So yeah, that's actually working pretty well. I mean, it's still a pretty decent poly count. I'd probably want to have it be even bigger voxels. So if I say volume builder 10, did I even do something? Turn off smoothing. We don't need that. Yeah, there we go. So, but yeah, okay. Now I want to really reduce it there like that. I might be going overboard. This is going to be a little bit sloppy, but yeah, there we go. We're just going to inflate the giraffe a little bit extra. So hopefully that's capturing all of his individual parts. And let's see, we can even see by turning on the other one. So yeah, it looks like we're pretty much capturing it. A little tip of the ear is not there, but that becomes a low poly mesh that we can work from. So I can go ahead and make this one editable. So we get this big old weird inflated giraffe. But this is what we can run our soft bodies on. So let's hide our original. And now we had all those stiffness problems. But now when we hit play, my hope is, yeah, you see that we don't have those same stiffness problems. So that's working pretty well. It does want to tip forward. It could just be the design of this model is like very front heavy. Actually, I'm not even sure if this would work, but I would be curious if we can shift our center of mass further back. So we've got, what's our orientation here? Also, let's check our scale. Well, that scale's pretty good. But we want to go Z plus on our center of mass. So we got X, Y, Z. So I'm going to go 50 units backward and put our center of mass back there. I'm just curious if that has any effect. That didn't seem to. I'm going to go pretty extreme on it and see if that does anything. This might not have any effect on soft bodies. And sadly, it does indeed seem like it does not have any effect on soft bodies. So yeah. No center of mass, too bad. No follow rotation. Hopefully it doesn't fall forward. Oh man, I'm not even sure what to do about it wanting to tip forward, except for bending the giraffe's neck backward, which is an option. I guess for simplicity's sake, yeah, that would probably be the best thing to do. Otherwise, we got to worry about the dynamics. It's just too front heavy right now. So if we were to just take this bend, put it right there, I'm going to say maintain the length. Let's go ahead and give it some strength. Make it a child. And now we can have our giraffe tilt backward with 90 degrees. And now we can have him go bump, 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 bump. But anyway, we've got our giraffe and he's tilting his head backward. Let's go ahead and pull it down. There we go. Should be a little less front heavy. Yeah, we'll do that. And then we also have to make sure we put that down into our other giraffe model so he'll continue to match. So in any case, now we can right click and say current state to object. And now this becomes our giraffe mesh. And now that has a soft bodies, and now it should not be nearly as front heavy. It still is significantly, but you know what? We're going with it. We're just going to stick with that. So now we've got that. Now we could run soft bodies and start melting it down in various areas. So let me think. We could just start decreasing the stiffness. Honestly, at a certain point, I think stiffnesses start having diminishing returns. So yeah, we could start animating that up. It just keeps falling forward. Stop falling forward, giraffe. Follow rotation, 15. I guess that's okay. So the idea here would be we can start decreasing our stiffness, and we're going to slowly start getting that melting effect. So let's go ahead and keyframe our stiffness. Let's just say it's 0, it's 10. And at the end, it will be, I don't know, let's just go to 0. And let's see what we get here. So now it can slowly start losing stiffness. And as it loses stiffness, which isn't having, okay, it's slowly going down. But I think some of this goes to our shear and flexion. So yeah, it's not going to melt that way. It is slowly going into a puddle, which is pretty great. Yeah, as the stiffness goes down, it's going down, which is pretty great. I do like it. Let's go and make that be a little quicker so that it gets to that point faster. So that's going to be melting down. I am going to want to give it a little bit of pressure so that these bottom parts don't completely deflate. But we can see that it's going to melt down. We get to this point, it's going to continue to melt down. So overall, pretty good melting right there. I'm pretty happy with that. We do have our volume on, but I think we need a little bit of pressure. And as soon as I turn on some pressure, it's going to suddenly inflate the entire thing. Yeah, a little bit of inflating. We don't need much. I just want a lot of volume conservation. And the idea would be once we lose our stiffness that it can fold over, but it always has to be a little bit inflated. So you can see as these, it still pinches pretty tight. I think our volume could get around. This is hilarious. So yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's pretty good. You know what? I'm going to continue from this point because that's hilarious. So yeah, there's a lot of things we can do. We could animate vertex maps so that different vertex maps are different stiffnesses and whatnot. I'm pretty okay with what it's doing right there. So now we take a mesh deformer. We're going to put this mesh deformer inside of our other giraffe mesh. It's actually going to be the very first thing that calculates. I guess I'll put the eyeballs in there as well. And we're going to put the volume mesher as our deforming mesh, as the reference mesh. And I'm going to tell it that the external surface should be calculated based on the surface area, very important to set. And I can just say initialize. Now you see our big volume mesh is going to just kind of disappear. And now we can hide the visibility of all of these. And, actually, before I initialize, the bend should come before the mesh. So we're going to rewind and reinitialize, I think. Does that make sense? I think it does. So if we don't have that, he's up. And then it goes forward. I'm going to say restore, enter. Oh, okay, delete. The bend is bending it up, and this mesh is indeed up. So that's the state we want it to be. I might need to current state to object our giraffe before I do the meshing. I don't actually know if I need to. Let's see. If I say put in the volume mesher and then say initialize, yeah, the head goes back down, so I think it's not acknowledging the bend. Unless there's some sort of like post deformer or something. No, I don't see one. So pretty straightforward. We'll just make sure that we put the bend deformer on here. So I'm going to, I've got the giraffe selected. His eyeballs, yeah, his eyeballs are there as well. Let's just go ahead and put that into a connect object. Don't weld, make it editable. Now it's just one mesh. Keep it simple, keep it simple. Put the mesh deformer in, initialize the mesh, and now it didn't fall away. And now we can put our displacer in there. And the displacer should be keyframed up to inflate the giraffe a little bit as it goes. So let's see, if we hit play now we should have this giraffe with his wonky legs, but now it's not calculating this. It's calculating the melting based on our other one. So you can see as as he's going down and melting into this poor puddle, it's pretty good melting. I'm entertained. So yeah, that's all going blah, blah. And now, like I said, our soft bodies are not acknowledging each other, so it's running really quick. But because we're going to feed this into a volume mesher in the end, I think it's going to work pretty well. So my thought here is, if we, well, honestly, we can put the subdivision surface on, and I think that should continue to work. Yep. And then we can put into the volume builder. And it's just a deformer, so that should work. And then we can mesh that. So this also now has the smoothing on top and the keyframed bulging out of the giraffe. So if we go and change this, we should have our kind of overall giraffe mesh. But now, as these parts melt, they should just blob into each other. And when the head tilts over, it should blob into the rest of the body. So this is melting. Of course, everything is slower running all of the volume stuff, but it's dynamic. It's falling down. It's getting very blobby. Those are hitting the ground. It is turning into this big melty mess. Let's give ourselves a couple extra frames. And now the good part here is the head should be able to just start melting back into the surface. This is exactly what we were going for. Blur. So, okay, now we just end up with a melted puddle of giraffe. A couple additional things we could do. But let's go ahead and leave that there. I'm going to go ahead and save this as the next file. Now, the actual in the back in the reference, a very important variable. We've got the melting going really well, and by the way, we could push that way further. We could push the melting beyond that, but we want to start looking at some of this. Yeah, so we got that melting part going, but we want to start worrying about some of the bubbling here, some of the little crackling on the surface, and that is going to be potentially a challenging part. What I actually think I'm going to do is let's make a test mesh and go into a new file and start testing. So this is about the size of the body of the giraffe. In fact, why don't we make it more the size of the head? So that's kind of the scale we're working at. So we'll keep that in mind. I can copy that and then open up a new file, paste it, Shift C, PSR to reset the PSR. We're at 000. And here is our sphere. Let's also go back to the R file and grab our entire volume mesher and paste it in here because I want to steal... Oops, keep the sphere. I want to steal our volume builder because that's the same resolution that our giraffe is running at. So you can see the kind of geometry that we're working with. This is what it looks like. So the first version of this I want to try is probably just a matrix object. Taking a matrix object and cloning onto an object, and the object will be the volume measure itself. And we are on surface, so we can have a count of these, and that's working fine. Now we can change the random seed and these will start moving around, or that would be a viable thing to have happen. But that's not going to quite move the way I think we want it to. So there's a couple things we might need to test. But the thing I'm curious about is, can we now feed this matrix object, which is viewing the volume measure as the place we're supposed to clone, can we now feed that in as a source for the volume as well? And after hiding it, it does indeed seem like we can. So now in the volume measure, I could say that this should be subtracting those. Our mesh is not detailed enough to, oh, that's interesting. As I move my mouse around, you see we're getting all this kind of jitter. And that's because the volume measure is saying, look at the mesh. But then the mesh is saying, like, update because of the matrix. And the matrix is saying, well, the mesh changed. I have to change my position. So it's jumping around every refresh. So if we were to hit play here, I think it will work, but it's going to be completely staticky. So it's interesting, but definitely a limitation. So I think we need the matrix object to not look at the volume mesh. We need it to look at our original mesh or something outside of it. So if I said sphere, it should actually be stable. You see how it's not going staticky all over the place. Now, it doesn't have to be completely stable. If we were to make a displace deformer and put it in there and put a noise in, I think they'll stick. I'm not sure. So yeah, we could do this, and you could see how they're still sticking pretty well on the surface. And actually, this little bit of bubbling, roiling look is actually working pretty well. So we've got our matrix object. So we do have the ability to start like changing the seed here. But and honestly, I'm a little stumped as to the way I actually want to do this, because while that's working, this is working well. And keep in mind, here's what's actually happening. This is working well. But I want them kind of popping into existence and out of existence, like a constant generation of particles. I was trying to do this without plugins, but the only thing I can think that would work pretty well here would be X particles. Like we need something that can be that can spawn and then despawn given a little bit of time. And I mean, we could use thinking particles, but we're not going to do that. So as much as I was trying to sort of avoid it, well, you can see how we did it with the matrix here. But let's go ahead and do the test now with X particles. I like this displacement. We might even keep it, but I'm going to make it a little bit weaker so our surface can be kind of roiling a little bit. But the idea now is make a X particle emitter, and we're going to tell the shape to be an object, and the object, I think we're going to have to once again put it on the sphere. I'm going to tell it to be stuck to the source object. So now the particles get stuck there. And if we say emission, I don't want it to have the full lifetime, so we'll let each of them live like 10 frames. Let's see what happens. So now you can see, I think as one particle dies, it will spawn another. I'm not entirely sure, so let's go and give ourselves a ton of frames. And let's go ahead and make it so you guys can see these particles a little bit better. Let's go ahead and set it from dots to, let's make circles. Actually, let's do filled in circles. So we can see these appearing and disappearing. It seems to maintain kind of a constant number. It seems to be working pretty well. They seem to be, yeah, right now they're cloning on polygon center. I'm going to tell it to clone onto the polygon area so they can appear anywhere. There we go. Now we're kind of getting this broiling effect. And now that we get this broiling effect, we could probably clone, we could probably feed this directly into the volume builder if we set it correctly. I don't think it'll accept this by default. That won't do anything putting an emitter in like that. But if we tell this emitter that it has, in its editing, it is editable. Is it not editable? Oh yeah, points editable. So I think now it's actually outputting points. I think that's accurate. So it's outputting points, which means when we go into the volume builder and we put this up here, I'm going to say use mesh points. There we go. There we go. So now you can see the particles are appearing and then disappearing over time. Now there's definitely some things there's some additional things we could do, like when we emit the particle, we're saying it's stuck to the surface. And I like that, but we could say don't stick to the surface, and then we could have the speed be something like -5. So as they're created, they're actually traveling inward to the surface. Actually, we can't go negative, which is interesting. So I'm going to say 3. Yeah, so you see how we're kind of getting this vibe of growth from it. But if we go to our object, can we okay, so we're particle direction normal. I'm going to say invert, so they should be facing inward. So now do you see how we feel like we're shrinking? There's this constant shrinking vibe, but then these little pops are kind of recreating it outward. That's kind of the effect I was going for. So those are getting added. Now that's actually a union. I guess more what we wanted was a subtract. So these are actually taking bytes out of it. We have a radius here, so I'm going to shrink that radius. And now if we go too small, our voxel size can't acknowledge it. So we might need to keep it back to its size of like 4, but we need fewer of these. So let's go back to our mission. We have a birth rate of about 1,000. Let's go ahead and drop it down to about 500, so about half the amount. There we go. Now we're feeling those pops a little bit better. Now, even having said that, like they're still a little bit outside the, they're just kind of appearing outside. So, or it's like suddenly there's a big hole in there. So it goes to things like if we were to, can we offset emission, variation, lifespan? I thought there was an offset somewhere. Oh yeah, offset origin. So if we say minus, or actually +5, there we go. So now the particles are actually spawning, I think outside, is that? Yeah, so you can see the particles are spawning outside. And if we spawn outside and they're slowly traveling inward, then you'll see them slowly kind of pierce into the skin. So I'm going to spawn them a little bit further out. Let's have them live for a little bit longer. So right now their lifespan is 10. I'm going to say their lifespan is 20. So now, I guess they're still being created a little too far out. So let's say 5. Restart. So they get created on the outside. Let's see if they start. Okay, they do start piercing it. Maybe have them be a little bit quicker. So speed of 5. So there we go. See how, yeah, okay, now we're getting them traveling in. I'd still like them to go further, so I'm going to speed them up, especially if we have a time lapse going. I would kind of want them not to disappear, just disappear. I want them to disappear having traveled inside of our mesh. So yeah, okay, that's a little bit better. They're popping less. Once again, the radiuses we're playing with, because we're trying to run this quickly. I would love to crank up this detail up to like 1, and now you can really feel what we're doing, how these are traveling inside. Because we're running it quick, because we want the mesh to be not terribly detailed, we're losing those details. And keep in mind, we could put our smoothing layer above it, so we can say, okay, you're smoothing. I'm going to stop keyframing the detail here, but we can smooth out a little bit. So now we still get that shrinking vibe, but we're losing that detail. So I hope you see the limitation of what we're trying to do. Let's see if we can apply this to our overall giraffe. I'm not sure we can, But let's go ahead and give this file a save as well. Melting plastic, pop rig, save that one. Okay, so let's go ahead back to our melting plastic. I'm going to paste in our emitter. This emitter, I guess, should be referencing this connected giraffe mesh. So we can put that there. And I'm going to turn off our volumes for a second, and let's see if we are seeing the emission. Let's make it visible. There we go. So, okay, here's another problem. If we don't stick the particles to our mesh, then they're going to not stay with it. So we'd have to say stick particles to the mesh. And now they'll travel with it, but now they're not traveling inward. There might be ways around it, but we're not going to spend any more time on that part. Conceptually, you saw what we were doing. It's possible that we could have each of these particles actually be generating some sort of geometry, and that geometry is animated to slowly travel inward. So we could potentially have the effect work overall. But let's go ahead and turn on our volume builder and mesher. In the volume builder, let's go ahead and feed in our particles. And the particles, I'm going to say, use the mesh points. And now looks like he's diseased. So we're going to tell that to subtract. And now it should be taking those bytes out. And let's see, if we just go ahead and hit play here, he's going to have these little pop marks that are there. And then, I mean, the effect, it's more like he's getting shot at. It's because we're losing the roiling, because we're sticking it to the surface instead of letting it travel through. We're losing that effect. I mean, they are there, and then they slowly are fading away, which is cool. It's not quite the overall effect, so we need to take a lot more time and combine those two effects on top of each other. I also probably want to have various ones with different amounts of strength or some smoothing on top of it. It is cool that we are kind of getting this additional detail that's traveling along with the mesh. So if we textured this, it wouldn't work, but because we're actually putting geometry on it, it is actually stuck onto the surface. But we're definitely not getting the roiling effect that we had wanted. I mean, potentially we could turn off stick particle and then have these only live for a second and then have them travel a lot quicker. So we can have these travel. I'm not sure what this will do, but and we might just see it for like a split moment. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of, it feels more like we are passing through it because it's not inheriting the motion of the object. We could say motion inheritance, but I don't know if that would work. Oh, it does. Okay, that's working pretty well. So it's taking out at least the motion when it's created, so that's okay. And that's still being emitted in. So, that's sort of working. It's working better than I thought it would. And of course, what we would end up doing is making a lot more particles here, like at least 10 times as many. And at a certain point, this is just going to start slowing us down too much. And yeah, you can see as it's falling away, like they need to inherit the motion. So if you change your motion, it's not going to stick. So it's a slightly tricky one. I would love to get that boiling effect working a little bit better. Having said all of that, we could also put a second displacer in here into the base mesh of the giraffe, which actually I'd probably want to be after the subdivision surface. And if we were on this copy, to make a noise and make the noise, I don't know, smaller and give it some animation speed, then we could probably get this motion working okay. And then hopefully it's kind of sticking to the original geometry of the giraffe, and then it gets deformed after the fact. I'm not sure which is calculating first, so let's see if it feels like it's passing through. Let's go ahead and turn off the emitter. My only question here is this noise, in fact, I'm going to turn off the noise. Are we passing through the noise? Why? I turned off the emitter, and yet it's still acknowledging those. A little strange, but I'm going to say no, turn off. It does seem to be passing through the noise, but that's inflating, that's deforming. I guess we want it to happen before the mesh deformer, but I'm not sure that the mesh deformer would allow that. Not only that, this would have to be subdivided. The order of operations is wrong, where it'd have to be subdivided a lot first, otherwise it can't displace it. Otherwise, it's going to pass right through the noise, which is the same problem we're having with our particles. Um, and right now, yeah, even on this mesh, there's not enough geometry on that part of the giraffe for it to even acknowledge the subdivisions. We need it to be more subdivided for that to kind of count. Um, and I mean, it's still going to pass through it, but we even along those lines, we'd have options. Like we could give it some animation speed, so we could have it traveling downward. So I think if we did that, we could probably get a general downward motion. This could probably feel like it's traveling downward, kind of a little melty effect. It's probably going way too fast. And of course, the giraffe's passing through it, so it's probably all a moot point anyway. Come on, melty giraffe. Yeah, I mean, obviously we could keep going and going and going. But I want to go and get to some more questions, so we will wrap this one up right here. And we are going to rapid fire our way through a bunch of other questions because we spent more time on that one than I wanted to. But there's a lot of really fun, unrelated techniques. Hopefully you saw that there's like a lot of fun, different details in there, and not just mutilating this poor giraffe as he sadly melts away. Let's just watch him melt one last time. Go ahead and put your questions back in the chat again, so I can make sure to be working from the new links and not the ones you guys are having conversations about. He turns into Nessie there, or maybe some sort of swan. Bloop, bloop, bloop. Oh, it's like the Terminator. Blur. That's cool, and it would be, maybe I'll keep this in mind for a proper tutorial at some point, getting that sort of melting plastic effect, because it's pretty cool. But that's as far as we can go right now. You know what's funny and sad is I actually had the same melting effect happen on one of my 3D prints one time because I was using acetone to smooth and melt the plastic, and I went too far and it started boiling the plastic. Yeah, exactly. Leo saying put a noise in the material. We could, and I'd want to make that material a 2D noise, but it'd have to be subdivided. We have to change the entire hierarchy to make it work properly. But yeah, we could have probably gotten that to do something pretty well as well. Harvard got in there first, so let's go ahead and click on your link. So we got something. We got a Twitter link to Bees and Bombs. Zoom. Oh, that's cool. So this is made by Dave, who is at Bees and Bombs on Twitter. And we got a really cool, clean effect. And it is pretty interesting. I like it. Let me think. Okay, so that's just a line traveling back and forth. But then it's slowly scaling outward. It could be a particle emitter that's twirling around. I can, there's probably a lot of, there's probably a lot of different techniques here. Paul's saying that you could potentially spline wrap a null on a helix. The problem with that, I guess it is just kind of traveling back and forth. I want something a little bit more dynamic. So I have a pretty straightforward idea here that I think will work pretty well. Let's go ahead and I wonder if we can do this without signal. I'm going to try and use just vibrate tag. I'm going to go ahead and create a null, and inside the null, let's just immediately go ahead and create a vibrate tag. And on the vibrate tag, I'm going to say enable position, and we're going to have it travel back and forth 1,000. I'm going to turn on a regular pulse. So now you can see it's actually going zoom, 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 zoom. So let's go ahead and set that down to 0.2. And let's see what we get. Okay, so now it is indeed traveling back and forth between the two. Let's see what we get. So it's going one way and then the other. So, okay, not bad. Let's speed it up. It seems a little Okay, that's just when it resets. So, okay, I think that's actually working pretty well. Let's have it travel 200 back and forth. And we'll slow it down. And let's give ourselves some more frames. So now we've got something traveling back and forth. My thought is if we go and create an emitter, actually, strangely enough, if we create a emitter, what am I doing? Simulate particles, emitter, regular old emitter. I'm going to tell it to emit a single particle, and I'm going to tell it to emit particles forever. Add a couple zeros there. Pew, pew. Actually, I think if we're 30 frames a second, I want to put 30. So I want one particle a frame, and I'm going to set the radius down to 0, 0. And now we should have a steady stream of particles. With any luck, it's even. Although I got to say it doesn't look like it's even. Are we 30 frames? Yeah, we are 30 frames. I would think 30 would be exactly 30. But that's fine. I'm going to give them a lifetime of 200 frames and a speed. I guess I can have a speed. And give them a speed of 50. So now what we do is we put this inside of the null and we zero it out. We have to pause it, otherwise we can't type down here. And we pause it, and now what we do is we keyframe it. So I'm going to keyframe the emitter at the coordinate. I'm not sure which one, so let's spin that. It's P. So let's go ahead and record on P, and I'm going to fast forward to the end. I'm going to type in 720,000. I'm not sure how fast that is. Let's hit play. Okay, it's not linear. I'm going to select this entire timeline and say linear. I want to see how fast that spins. Okay, that's actually pretty good. Okay, so a couple things I see. We're going to need to slow this way down. So let's make it 0.05. So now we're traveling, and you can see that we start out with a really thin line, and then it slowly is creating a helix as it moves around. So we start out with that nice thin line. Okay, what's next? Well, I mean, the obvious thing is you go and you create a MoGraph tracer object, and now we just say that's looking at the emitter, and it's connecting all the objects, and now we get this one continuous line. So now this is going to travel along, constantly making this spiral, and you see it slows down on the end. I think it's kind of doing a sine wave, so you can see we get that big spiral there, and then it travels back. The only problem I'm seeing is that the emitter is not emitting one particle per frame. I thought it did, but maybe there's still some randomness built in. So if we switch this over to X particles, that would automatically solve the problem. It would just be working. But yeah, we can see that, yeah, that's actually working pretty much exactly like what we saw. Let's double the speed. So we get our pretty straight line. And then it starts traveling back and forth, making a constantly expanding helix. I wonder if there's a way with regular. If we're using X particles, obviously get all the particle options. It'd be really cool. I was hoping that there'd be some way of pushing them all away, but the attractor is constantly. The attractor wouldn't be in every direction. Essentially, like what I want is an inverse friction, something where I could do a friction and then do a fall off, and as they get further away, they speed up. I don't think there's any such thing as a negative friction. That'd be funny if I could go negative. Well, you can't type. Oh my goodness. Can you do negative friction? Does that accelerate as time goes on? I think it does. There's such a thing as negative friction, everybody. I had no idea. Okay, so what that means is we could emit these very slowly. They do need some speed, but not too much. Oh yeah, and I think friction can behave really oddly with fall off. But if we create a cylindrical fall off, set that to Z plus, and give it a full fall off, make this thing really long. And now we can just control our radius. So now as it goes further out, it actually gets faster. So we can get a nice long straight line before, and keep in mind, the first couple frames we got to refresh it, otherwise it won't move. But it's going to go faster as it travels outward. And so we can get that longer straight line for the initial part. And now we just need to calibrate our strength. So it starts growing faster as it starts traveling outward, or maybe our radius is a little too big. So yeah, now you get your nice straight line. I'm going to double the speed to 10. Nice straight line. And now it's traveling out, and you can see that we're gaining speed as it goes out. So as it gets to the end of its life, we're getting more of the helix shape. So that's pretty much working perfectly. Once again, the exception being the generic emitter is spitting out 30 frames a second, but it's not doing it evenly. So that's working shockingly well. Let me think. I guess based on the acceleration it's doing, we'd want the ping-ponging back and forth to be a little slower. So let's set our frequency down to 0.5. And now it can be traveling slower, but has more time to accelerate. And then it travels back, and we get more of our straight line before it starts accelerating out our radius. And there we go. I think we've got exactly the effect. It's pretty cool. And right now we are using this vibrate tag. Let's go and give this a quick save. Using the vibrate tag is a fine way of setting up this very simple looping animation. Enlarging spiral. This is a fine way of generating it. But way better, of course, would be signal here, because we get a lot of control over the way this is moving from side to side, or having it randomly move. But yeah, that's all working very, very well. I am quite pleased with it. And then, of course, rendering wise, I guess we'll just spend a moment. We could, of course, go and create two different main ways. One would be hair, and the other would be sketch and tune. I guess sketch and tune on this particular instance might be better. Although when it makes the 180 switch, it could get confused. But let's go ahead and create a sketch material, and we will apply it to our tracer. And right away, when we hit render, we should be black on white. And we can pop open our line, and now we have all the options of what we want. So first of all, I'd give it a bunch of thickness. Let's give it a thickness of 10. See what that looks like. Yeah, do you see how we're getting these little, I don't know if these are happening because of the wobbles in the tracer. I'm actually inclined to, what would happen if we drop it to 1515? It's going to be less resolution. But now there's less points to worry about, so it should look smoother initially. And if we tell the tracer to be a B-spline, then it's going to, and then let's give it some intermediate points. It should really smooth out the way it looks overall. So yeah, it's kind of weird, but I feel like at this point, the fewer particles we emit, the cleaner the effect will be. I guess it's going to be, it's going to be a little jerky there because it's only emitting so many. But now we're going to get a smoother spline because it's emitting them more evenly. And it's giving us kind of a fun stop motion vibe. It's emitting them more evenly and then smoothing them out after the fact. And B-spline is like the smoothest of all the splines. So anyway, now we can see that we actually, indeed, because it's so smooth, you see we're not getting that jerkiness inside the line. So now we have all the options to go to our opacity, and we can say a long stroke. And now it should get more transparent as it fades. It's backwards. In fact, we should probably grab our tracer and just tell it to reverse so that is the opposite. And you see it fades back. Now you see this one point where, I wonder if we can fix this real quick. You see where it's overlapping right there? So we get like a double opacity. I wonder if we can fix that. If we say rendering, when it self-blends, I don't want to say normal. Let's try average. There we go. That was easy. Under self-blend, it's like what happens when it's running over itself, and it was just adding them. Seeing both of them all the way, but by averaging it out, it's averaged out those two effects, and now it's kind of blended them together. We'd also potentially say like darken, or no, darken won't work. Lighten probably won't work. Yeah, well, in any case, average did work, so I'll take it. I'd also want to turn off clip strokes to screen in general, because if this accidentally went off the edge of the screen, it would just chop off the spline. I'd want it to continue off the line. But now we got this nice little swirl. You can, of course, adjust your thickness. We could double the thickness here, and then a long stroke, and then change this to, or right now it's linear along the stroke, so now it's going to get skinny as it gets to the tip of the tail. But we could, of course, change this to be spline based. And now we could, yeah, they're already soft, so we could go and curve these so that it it's not going to go down to 0 on the end, or maybe it's supposed to get thicker on the end, and the beginning's a little skinnier. So I get that sharp line there, and it gets a little big over there. And there's so many fun things, like we can go to opacity, and we can say from line, and from line is going to actually make it fade off on one side, and it's a pretty cool effect. But you can push it further by grabbing this, pulling it into the middle, and dragging another line, and we can even those out. And what we're doing is we're making the edges fuzzy. So you see we've actually got this soft line traveling from one side to the other. They're not lightning, or they're not averaging as well on top of each other. It might have to do with the once again, the blending or the clipping. There might be a better overlay. Overlay, in fact, works okay. It might not be any different. Yeah, actually, it is different. Screen, darken, difference, negative, exclusive. And yeah, I just have to go and start checking all of them. One of these could be better than the others. But in any case, in this case, overlay looked okay. So we can leave that there, and then we draw that line. So now we get this nice sketch and tune line going and traveling along. And, there's so much fun you can have. We can go and turn on clone, and now there should be, we can add in some extra variation and offset. I'm not even sure if you can clone on here. Yeah, you can. There you go. Yeah, you get a bunch of different clones. You can put variation of thickness and variation on everything. Hue, saturation, get some value, more off, get some overshoots, tiny bit of scale and rotation. But yeah, you can start cloning a bunch of lines. So yeah, you can start getting some craziness that way. Line offset's a little big. Start making them a little bit more, make the opacity lower so that as they start layering up, you get more interesting things. I don't know. It gets crazy. It's really fun to combine these different things. It never ends the ways you can combine this. But yeah, I think that is pretty much that effect. So let's go ahead and give that another save and jump on to the next question. Thanks for that one. It's fun. Ben, let's see. This 3D artist, look at his pictures. They're wonderful, but the hashtags don't reveal the process. Is it 3D or not? A glass texture on a textile object, maybe. Bum, bum, bum. Let's see what we got. Do you... Bah, 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 bah. Well, this is a Griff from New York, New York. And indeed, they are not saying how they made it. So it could be, I mean, it does say photography, but it, VS, what's that mean? What is, oh, that's a different person. Yeah, let me think for a second. Honestly, I'm getting nothing. Does anybody have... Oh, he has some things that are definitely renders. Let's check out some of his other work. Why is that? Was that a story? I don't want a story. I just want to see his Instagram. Let's see. Okay, so we got some neon. We got, oh, that's super cool. Look at that. I don't even know where to begin with that. Refraction, color, liquid. Man, that's cool. Yeah, look at all of these crazy surfaces. Yeah, he's not revealing any secrets. Some of them, like, there's such a great, like on this one, there's such a great depth on it. I mean, it would just be tinkering, and yeah, some people are already saying in the chat, and that's what I was thinking, would just be playing with some thin film. So that would be a fine place to start. And let's see if we can put in some weird channels and get some good effects out of it. So I'm going to make a sphere. I'm going to make a icosahedron. Let's go ahead and give ourselves some significant subdivisions because I want to get some extra displacement on it so that we can maybe have extra surfaces to catch highlights. So let's go and do our standard make a displacer, make a noise. Let's scale this up to what, 300? Yeah, that's fine. And push that a little bit further. In fact, why don't we go with a different type of noise? And then give ourselves lots of subdivisions. Something like that. Noise is a little small. There we go, something like that. And let's go ahead and give ourselves 500 levels of segments. So this thing is pretty heavily subdivided. And then, just for good measure, let's do one subdivision surface after the fact, which should smooth that all out, just to give us a really high but clean, really high mesh, but should be relatively clean. So now we've got a crazy surface to work from. Thin film. So the thin film shader, usually you would put in transparency, but the very first thing I want to do is let's try putting it not in transparency. Let's try putting the thin film shader inside of luminance. By the way, we are using just the generic cinema materials, not the new node-based stuff. There might be other cool things there. So by putting the thin film here, we can go ahead and apply it and hitting render. So right away, okay, it does do something. The problem with this version of it is it's kind of just behaving like it's behaving like a Fresnel. It's not anything particularly fancy here. Like, it's cool colors, but it just looks like we put a Fresnel on there. I'm going to just try playing with some different settings. We'll put some extra spectral samples on there. Honestly, I'm not even sure what these settings do. We got our thickness in nanometers, which is, as we change this, we're going to get dramatically different colors because these are like mathematically reproducing what the effects would be at these different thicknesses. So it's like creating a very, 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 very thin shell on something. So you see, like, yes, we're getting some cool effects here, but this is nothing like what we were seeing in those renders. So even if we were to like really get up here, get some nicer composition and do something like this, like that is clearly not the extent of what we were seeing. So then it starts going to, can we go to layers like reflection and then reflect the thin film as well? I'm going to copy that and let's paste it into our layer color. And if we turn off our reflection, that's a specular. I probably should have immediately turned it to a GGX. Let's chill out the specular, no roughness, lots of reflection. So now you see we're going to be reflecting that. So now let's go and put in some sort of HDR. We're just in vanilla cinema, so I just need an HDR. So I'm just going to go ahead and pop open HDR Studio from Grayscale Gorilla. I want something with a lot of detail everywhere. So I like going for a couple of these interior ones. There's a lot of ceiling detail here, so I'm going to click on Derelict 1. It is a go-to one for me, but just because it does a really good job of showing detail on the ceiling and floor and walls. But in any case, now we're just got the reflection going. So now, okay, now we got a little bit more something that we might, maybe there is something here. I feel inclined to increase our subdivisions by another layer just to smooth that out more. And yeah, now they all get smoother, and now we're starting to get something a little bit interesting. So if you were to combine that with our luminance channel, now, yeah, okay, now we're getting something. There's a little bit of something going on here. I'm going to tell the HDRI to not be in the background or the floor. So it's just in the black environment. And then, honestly, I'm thinking maybe if we go to the metals, we get some of these metallic looking ones, the colors entirely being introduced via the reflection shader. And yeah, now we're getting an interesting layer of depth going. I wanted some darkness. They're better softer in this particular instance. Let's try that one. I mean, that's fine to tinker with. So now we've got, now we've got it in the luminance channel. We've got it in the reflection channel. We could also go into the transparency channel. If we go careful with this, if we put in a Fresnel, what do we want to do? 1 point, 1.5 is fine. So now it's refracting, and then we put our thin film in there as well. Actually, I think you usually just put in the reflection, but I'm going to put into the transparency, because why not? And hit render. Okay, well, apparently that doesn't do much of anything. But, well, yeah, let's take it out of there. So now we're just refracting. And if we put some Fresnel in there, let's turn on physically based Fresnel. And hit render. Okay, that still killed off the reflections. Invert. Starting to take a hit on those render times. But it's still just black, so man, transparency is just killing us there. But okay, so what the next point I was going to make is, what if we copy and pasted this layer a couple times and we put in some different thin films, so we could do like a different index of refraction and potentially change the thickness of it. And now we've got these two, and it's adding on top of the previous layer. So when we render that, well, I guess it's just normal and add. It seems to be overriding it quite a bit, but yeah, now there's this spacey type thing. Let's see. I'm going to set that to normal just to see what it looks like by itself. How much is it overriding the previous layer? I guess it's not. It is thinner. But let's put a greater index refraction on there, 0.7. Yeah, I don't know. It's so abstract. Yeah, it's interesting how this is just completely obliterating the layer underneath. I thought with the additive it wouldn't be obliterating it, but it does indeed seem to. It's neat looking, but this HDR is not rocking my boat. Let's go back to that one just because there's a little bit more of a dynamic range in it. I thought it gave us more. Yeah, there's definitely more things there. Average, additive, metal. If we go easy on the reflection, I think it's just, yeah, this seems to just completely override the layer underneath it, which is interesting. I don't know. And then it even goes to like, okay, well, what if we zoom our camera way up and we start getting into like nested reflections, or we just get like really, like it's not doing much for me, to tell you the truth. I am not sure. If we go back and look at these, I don't feel like we're anywhere near what is happening. Well, I guess one of the details that they have going on is it's almost like it is a luminance. It is, it's almost like this is in the luminance channel, not that one, luminance channel, and then you have a separate reflection, and those two combined give it the idea of like, yeah, there's like this more of a depth to it, where it's like, oh, there's a base color, but then you're getting these reflections on top of it. And that part definitely gives us a little something more. Not much more, but something. Like if we were to crank up these layers a lot more, like really make everything very sharp. It's weird and cool, but we are in no way getting what I would want to. I mean, but even along those lines, like, would this be adding another GGX, and then it's just going to be set to no roughness, no specular, go to the Fresnel, make it dielectric, and now we get this like shiny layer on top of it. So is it just like, see how that this is like, this is giving us like a definitive surface that we're viewing. So it kind of pops that part of the object out from what's going on underneath. And then we just have our thin film. We have a texture. I don't even that, like these textures. What happens when you put a texture in here? I don't know. And that's the thin film. That's what that's returning. But you know, what if we put that into a filter and we tell the and we tell the filter to crank up the saturation? So now our base layer is honestly not as crazy as I thought it would be. Let's do a hue shift, try and get some crazier colors introduced via, yeah, see that? So now we got this crazier luminance color, but I still feel like we'd want to be looping around more. We have our gradation curves. I wonder if that does something if we pull this in. Oops. If we do that, does it loop? No, I guess I didn't expect it to. Thin film. I can't think of a way of making the thin film loop itself more times, and if we change the number, it just kind of loses detail. Spectral sample, that's fine. Changing the index of refraction changes the colors, but that's not necessarily doing anything we want it to. I mean, yeah, we can introduce these cool colors, but it's still not going to do much here. Little hint of reflection. Yeah, let's move on to another question. Just I don't have a definitive instinct on where to go with this one. It's fun grabbing these shapes and giving it a little bit of definition and layering the things up. So it's like really cool, interesting patterns. Like it's almost like a subdivision surface type of vibe there. So it's cool, but we're just not getting the colors that I'd want to be getting. Where'd our spiral go? Oh, I must have not put the number 2. Crazy colors. Back to the chat. Uh-oh, Thanos is in the room. What's going on, Thanos? May I ask how we will get an effect like this? Soft bodies being pushed by ropes of some kind. Oh, interesting. Let's see what we've got. Whoa, look at this. This is Vincent Schwink. Vincent Schwink. Ooh, neat. CG, Redshift, Cinema 4D. That's cool. Those bands are pulling in, but let me see. That's just one. That's another. This just seems like some relatively like the idea here is cool. And it's even for keeping the European Union together, I think. But the overall effect, I think, might be pretty straightforward. Let's go ahead and open up a new file. And we're going to keep it real simple. What's a basic shape we can... I mean, those shapes help because there's a little more complexity to them. So actually, yeah, here we're going to keep it simple. Let's use a tool we never use. I'm going to make our cube editable. Let's select it, and let's use a matrix extrude. When's the last time you did that for any practical reason? Let's hit apply, and I'm going to give it no movement and no rotation. And now we can just move it out a little bit. There we go. I like that. Let's go easy on the steps. And have it shrink to 65, 65, 65. Cool. I like it. That's our basic shape. So we will do that, and I'll make a cloner. And let's clone a couple of them. We'll go with a grid 2 by 3 by 2. And we will make them, I guess they would be soft bodies. They're soft bodies. You know what we're going to do? We are going to use a rigid body on them. And then we're going to hit play. Yeah, this is a good idea. Let's go ahead and on our dynamics tag, we're going to put a bunch of follow position on there. And now they should go boom, explode, and go crazy. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's go easy on that rotation. Oh, wait. Let's also change them to be moving meshes. There we go. Okay, apparently they're a little far apart. Okay, okay, okay. Sorry, I thought I could get these to blow, past each other really easily, and now it's being a pain. I mean, I know these strengths are really strong, but is that enough to push them? Yeah, they're super stuck together. Okay, let's go ahead and do a bigger radius. There we go, that's fine. I'm going to record that, and then let's play forward about 20 frames, and then we'll shrink them back up again. So because they are constantly trying to get to their final position, I should pull them all in, and then we get this nice cluster. That's all I wanted to do. I'm going to give it a size increment of 5. There we go. And now hopefully I should be able to just make that editable. Dang it. That happens sometimes. We have to bake it in order to make it editable. So I'm going to say bake the object, and now we can hit play, go to the frame we like, and now I can make it editable. And now we can pull, now we've just got cubes. These final cubes are pulled out. So that's all we really want to do. So now we've got all these dynamics tags. What we want to do is turn these into soft bodies. So we're going to say they're made of polygons and lines. I'm going to tell them that they're not self-colliding. Honestly, that's pretty much it. Let's turn off gravity. Command D, dynamics, gravity, 0. And if we hit play, they shouldn't already be touching. Yeah, so they're going to be wiggling around, doing their thing. It looks like that one might have been intersecting, honestly. All right, you're intersecting, so you go away. How's the rest of them? Ooh, that one's intersecting badly, too. I'm kind of surprised we're getting so many intersections. Yeah, that one's intersecting. Why are they intersecting so much? Why? Look at this one. What are you doing? Why are you doing this to me? Fine, you can just go over there. If you're not going to play nice. None of these are playing nice. Why did the dynamics run so poorly? All right, that seems fine. Bum, bum, bum. Okay, so those should collide with each other, but they don't worry about themselves. We could add some extra soft bodiness to them if we wanted to, but really, I'm thinking that all we need for this effect is to create a cylinder. And the cylinder, we're going to make a nice big radius, and we're going to turn off our caps. Let's go ahead and make sure we have enough subdivisions here. So let's say 42 and an extra subdivision upward. So that seems fine. So that becomes one band. Let's go ahead and shrink it until it's about the size of the objects. And the basic idea is we're just going to right click, add another soft body. We'll do this one from scratch. And then on the soft body, I'm going to keyframe it to be our rest length is 100. But then I'm going to hit play and go forward a little bit. And then around here, I guess honestly it's almost the entire animation. We're going to tell the rest length to be 50%. So essentially what we're doing is we're scaling it down. So you see as time goes on, it's actually shrinking it, but it's shrinking it via dynamics. And you can see where it starts scraping along those objects and it's actually interacting with them. So based on that, why don't we go ahead and grab all of these, and I'm going to give them no bounce and lots of friction. I'm going to do like 200% friction. So they are very, very frictiony. So now hopefully this, when it catches, it's kind of stuck on it. It's going to try and pull the objects. Let's give ourselves more frames. And now we've got one band, but now this is even parametric object, which is great. So I can copy and paste. And now the second one, let's increase the radius a little bit. And I'm going to grab it and rotate it to this angle. And let's copy and paste it. And let's grab this one and we'll spin this one over here. And we'll increase its radius. And why not? One more. And we'll rotate this one over here. And yeah, those are all ready to rock. And now let's just see what happens. Hit play, all of the bands start shrinking and colliding and pulling. And you see it's starting to wrangle in our objects. And I feel like we're actually getting something that's not unreasonably similar to what we were seeing. Let's go to our second keyframe here. I'm going to tell it to shrink to 35% instead of 50. So they should shrink a little bit tighter. So it should be pulling it in, looking pretty good. The one's going to escape, but that almost is the way it looked in the other one. Look at these great ropes we're getting. It's actually doing a really great job of tangling these all up. If we were inclined, we could tell these to have a little bit of a margin. So let's go ahead and give them a collision margin of maybe 1. Is that what I want, or is it going to be margin shape here? Yeah, okay, that's I wanted the margin this time. I never know which one it is. It's like when it's a soft body, you want margin. When it's a rigid body, you want size increment. I'm not sure. But yeah, based on that, we could probably, can I do it as a group? That'd be neat. Make a null, put them in, and then we can put that inside of a cloth surface. Sort of seems to be working. Yeah, add a little thickness to that. Let's go ahead and make some, put a color on there. Let's make it a nice dark color. We'll make another one. Let's make it a nice bright orangey color. We'll even go and make a tan one. Let's go ahead and make some of these orange. And then we'll make the rest of them tan. And that, yep, now we got all these elastic bands that are dynamically going to, oh, that's interesting. Oh, it's not, it's, the cloth surface seems to be confusing it in the viewport, but it's still calculating correctly. So they might render correctly, but it looks wrong in the viewport, so that's a little bit of a pain. But let's go ahead and turn off the cloth surface and just let these all pinch in. And yeah, honestly, if we aim this correctly, we could easily catch this rogue one. So we got this one, copy and paste this band. We'll make that one a little bit smaller. In fact, right now they're all passing through each other, but I could do that one outside. So it's like inside of some rings and outside of other rings. And put that inside that group. And with any luck, we're going to capture that loose one. So now they can all get pulled in. Grab it. Come on, pull it in. Ooh, it's a wily one. And honestly, these could be rigid bodies at this point. They don't have to be soft bodies, but they are working as soft bodies. Even as soft bodies, it might be kind of nice to, right now, I'm going to say the shear is really stiff and the flexion is really stiff. So I'm going to actually, and then even our structural is quite stiff. So let's go ahead and go easy on the damping on all of them too, so they have a little bit of extra wiggle on them. And these should be pretty squishy now. They should be able to bend a little bit more. So this should be able to squish them in a little bit more for whatever the final shape is. And, you know, if we were going like a little sadistic here, we can go and grab our final collision and squeeze them really tight. So we'll shrink this down to like 10. So as these get pulled down, they're going to be dramatically pinching these down to the point where they're going to be actually getting squished until they have to kind of escape. And we want to probably increase our radiuses on them. I wonder if we could even keyframe that up out of curiosity. Like, we don't want to go that far, so let's say 30, so a little tighter than before. But all of our cylinders have the same height of 200, but as it shrinks, it's shrinking those. But I wonder if we were to keyframe that and jump to the end, they all get a lot smaller. So if we were to tell this to go way bigger, I think, is that the correct parameter? Yeah, so you see they're getting thicker as they shrink. So it's counteracting. And now I might have gone too far. We want to make sure those keyframes were linear. But yeah, I think if we maybe only make it like 400, we can kind of maintain the thickness on them a little bit. So yeah, now they're, yeah, there we go. So now you see they're barely shrinking horizontally. So we get these bigger bands that are pinching in and trying to grasp everything in. Now I do think, I don't know for sure, but I think if we turn on our cloth surface, we'll actually get this thickness on there. I think if we render this out to the picture viewer, that we will see that they will kind of work correctly. I'm not sure, but let's find out. So outputs, I guess we can, let's go ahead and render it as just a standard, nothing fancy. Let's go ahead and put some terrible lighting in here, just so that there's some definition. Some soft shadows, give us a little bit of contact point. Take these two, make them a little bit dimmer, maybe add a little bit of color. Yeah, it's something. The shadows are terrible. We can turn on area shadows, which will look better, but it's going to take longer to render. That's fine. We got some time. We want to see it better, so I'll put a gray sky. There we go. Not the most beautiful of renders, but we should be able to see these pretty well. Let's go ahead and Save it as shrinking elastic bands, and send out to the picture viewer. And I should say all frames. Boom. And go. So the real question here is, does this now dynamically run and add the thickness on? And it does seem like it is. It's just one of those viewport things where it doesn't refresh completely correctly on the in the viewport, which is always a pain. Like, that's frustrating, but it does work. And then, of course, like these bands are very low poly. We could probably put them on subdivision surface to smooth them out a little bit if we wanted to, but more subdivisions on every direction would be helpful. Visually in this animation anyway, would probably be a really good idea to at least make a second color rubber band. So let's make a white one, and then we can make some of those. I guess I'll duplicate that and delete the every other one. And then those two. And now we can make these bands white. I mean, honestly, each one of these could just be made black and white, alternating, or put each one in their own subdivision surface. But that's working surprisingly well. Squish. Yeah, I mean, soft bodies are so robust. Like, they work so well. So that's pretty great. Squish. Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, so yeah, we got some rubber bands going. I think that does wrap that one up. Back to the chat. Let's see. I ended too quick for people to put questions. I'm going to scroll back up to the earlier part. Akmal, can we make these globes? You mean the dots and the links, and also the other globe shape with the connected line? I'll just have to see what you're talking about. Ooh. Look at this. Can you make these globes? And I mean these dots and the links on the globe on the other connected line. So what I'm thinking you mean are these nice little dots going and connecting from one spot to another to another. I'm trying to... Yes, we can. I learned... Okay, I have a way to show you how to do this, and I'm going to give a shout out to Robin Hadow, who is the person who told me how to do this. So let's go ahead and open up a new file. And the basic idea being, let's say we have a globe, and let's see, what's the best way to do the connections? Because we would need to... We need to make some quick direct connections, which is a little bit pain. There's apparently a plugin that does this pretty well. There is a plugin that does it. I don't know what the plugin is, but let's go and do it without a plugin. So I'm going to go ahead and make a sphere. Let's put a material on it. Go ahead and make it kind of a reddish orange there. Now we can see a little bit better. T for scale. And now what I want to do is probably hit Shift C and then hit E for move, and now we're snapping onto the surface. Bing, 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 bing. Now we're not actually snapping on the surface. If we tell our P, you'll see that we're snapping on the vertexes. I don't want to snap on the vertex. I want to snap to just edge polygon snap. So I think, yeah, just anywhere on the polygon. So now I'm just stuck on the surface. Cool. So what I would want to do, and I can't think of any automatic way to do this outside of a plugin. But if we're going to make a tracer object and connect the sphere and then sphere 2, then this should draw a direct line between them. So it's actually a direct connection between them. If we say connect elements, and then don't trace the vertices. So the idea should be is that we just have these two lines connecting. That's fine. Not too much to it. But what we need to do is start. I wish there's a quicker way. I mean, there might be ways with like X particles or something to automatically make this connection, and I'll have more to talk about this in the future. But for now, I'm just going to copy and paste and move these around. Um, and I do have to do it on a sphere by sphere basis. But you see, if we were to move that there and then move this here, like we're making those like new connections where they're snapped there, and by copying the tracer along with it, like each one just becomes a pair that gets connected. The tricky part that's a little frustrating is that we're not getting a connection back to the original. So we might be able to do that if I copy and pasted that and then move this sphere here. So what's its partner? Yeah, it did remember the partner. So like this line is going to connect to another existing kind of city. And then I can grab this again and then move it here. And I think that's 8. So if we click on this, yeah, that's the master city on this particular configuration. So I guess this isn't too hard. And if we had these very specific, this would not take that long to place them. Once again, I should probably hit a transparent mode here. Let's go ahead and turn on like lines so you can actually see our tracers traveling between. It's actually a little bit hard to see them as well. So let's, I mean, they're in there. So you can see we're getting all these connections. Honestly, that's as far as I'm going to go as far as making these connections. What I would do now, this is the interesting part, is you see we've got these different connections here. Those are our city connections. If we, I guess I'd probably copy and paste them and then make it editable, and then I'm going to right click and say connect and delete. So now we've got all these connected lines between the cities. So if we go and make a right click and add a hair or spline, hair spline dynamics tag, I'm going to go and select all of our points and then subdivide. Let's go and the shortcut is US, so I'm going to go US, 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 and now it's subdivided a bunch of times. So now if I select all, I can hit UK and shrink by 1, which means we don't have the points on the end. And I can say UI and invert my selection. So now I've got the end points on each of those splines. I'm going to say on our hair dynamics that those are set points. So if I hit play, you see all those are going to sag downward. But instead, let's go to our forces, say that there's no gravity, and now let's create a simulation particle attractor. And of course, you know where I'm going with this. We're going to set our speed way down, and we're going to set the attraction to negative, let's say 50. Let's make sure that we're going to change this to exclude, so it's going to see the force. And so now this attractor is pushing those all away. And if we keep on increasing the strength here, you can see that we're going to start getting a nice line that's pushed out from the center point, and we're getting these nice arcs traveling around. Make it 3 times as strong. You see we start getting, the stronger this effect, then the more we're going to get those arcs pushed out. And now you've got those lines pushed out. We could at any point delete this hair tag off of there, and there you go. Now you've got your splines arcing from point A to point B with gravity having kind of dynamically pushed them from one spot to the other. Yeah, so that pretty much does that one. And once again, shout out to Robin for a conversation we had where she mentioned that being a technique. City line connections. Typo. You got link to imager and a winky face. So that makes me, okay. Yeah. So the other day I tweeted out that I saw a really bright meteor fly like right outside my window. And then later I found that somebody had captured the meteor I saw on their security camera. So this is the meteor I saw. I just saw it from the city, and it was so bright that in the middle of the city I could see it. And it was pretty dang, it felt pretty close. Like I saw it this equivalent amount, and it was really bright. And Typo had said that he was going to link it to me in the live stream so that I would have a good excuse to go and try and make it. So I appreciate that. Now, having said that, the actual breaking apart of all these parts is kind of really straightforward. So it goes to Leo is saying scary. Seeing this fly, it was super exciting. I saw it bright, and I looked outside. I was like, "What the heck?" But then I actually went outside and laid on the on my deck. I have like a lawn chair, and I was on the chair for like another hour, like looking up in the sky, seeing if I could see any more meteors. And I only saw like the teeny tiniest one ever. Um, but yeah, there's just one that stood out a lot. So, um, a technique I would love to tinker with on this would be the idea of like fracturing a fracture. And I've done experiments with this, but haven't gotten super far. I'm not even going to spend too much time making this. I'm not going to spend any time making it pretty. Let's just immediately go into our fracture and then fracture again. So the idea here is pretty much if we have a Voronoi, if we put this into a Voronoi fracture, we get a bunch of breaks. And then I guess I'll just put a particle attractor here in the middle, set the speed down so it never goes too quick. Let's do a -50, -50 on the attraction. And if we make this dynamic, I think we have to put in the Voronoi. If I say simulation, rigid body, individual elements top level, I think that will be dynamic. I hit Control D, turn off gravity. So with any luck, this will just kind of float apart. There we go, working fine. Now what I want to have happen is as these float apart to run a second fracture that suddenly breaks apart. But I think that part is pretty simple and doable. The problem is they lose all of their velocity. Boom. Okay, so that breaks apart. Now, the idea being, if we were to make a copy of that Voronoi fracture and put it into a Voronoi fracture, it's just going to instantly break twice. So if we were to run this, then it's going fine. And then the idea would be at a certain point, we would turn the second one on, and you see it actually broke all those parts some more, and then continue. But, well, it didn't like that. It suddenly started freaking out. So it goes to... we'd actually been tinkering with a little bit of code to see if we could get some things working here. X particles in the upcoming version, they have a re-breaking, they have fracture and then refracture. But a problem, well, something I saw in the test that they showed at least, is it didn't seem to really maintain the velocity of the previous particle. It like lost all of it. What I'd love to have happen here is once this broke, to inherit the velocity of the previous object. And I just don't think that's a thing. Um, yeah, Eric is mentioning it could be it's in the XP Shatter object, and it's in the early access build, which we don't have. But it seemed like it didn't remember the initial velocity. So it's almost like at the moment of breaking, I'd want it to have a custom initial velocity of what the piece had before it. It doesn't inherit it. Um, so so that's the part I would love to explore, but I feel like it would just probably take a lot of time. And in addition to that, like we can't increase it. As soon as we increase it, it just creates new parts earlier on, so it doesn't work that way. Now we could put a bunch of breaks and then make a connector, so we can create a fixed connector. And now it's trying to push all of them apart, but there's actually a fixed connection here, so they can't break apart. And um, there's a braking force and there's the connector. It goes to it wants to, yeah, it does braking force and then a braking torque. And what I'd love to do is have it start breaking apart different parts and not let go until later. But I don't have very direct control over when they would, because like inside this fixed connector, there's no fall off. There's no we can't start feeding it fall offs, which would be really good. We could run like a wind, or I'm trying to think of what the right way to do it would be. We could run some sort of wind that would sort of force them apart. I just had a weird idea pop in my head. Instead of this attractor, if this was just sitting here, it's not going to do anything. But what if we made like an object that was cloning onto the surface here and is kind of randomly jumping around, and we'd make it invisible, and we'll see how tiny we can make it. And if it suddenly wedges itself in between two pieces, it kind of forces them apart. That might be kind of cool. That's not something I've tried before. So I'm going to make a sphere. It can be pretty low poly. Make it icosahedron. You can see what we got right there. There we go. That should be, let's go up one there. So if we make I'm going to make it actually pretty big right now. But the idea being is, let's just say, okay, I'm going to make it so that the sphere exists on this frame, but in the previous frame it didn't exist, okay? So that's the basic idea. So it exists and then doesn't exist. And we're going to make it a rigid body. So there we go. It's a rigid body and it's off. It's not a dynamic object. So if we were to put this right in the middle of our overall shape, nothing should happen, and then oh, no, why is it? It is existing. Did I do this backwards? Yeah, I did it backwards. Let's put that there. So nothing happens until it suddenly exists. Boom. And actually, that's not bad. Let's go and move this into someplace more forward. So it's going to suddenly exist there, and it almost gives us like this little explosive force, but it does force pieces away. So that's kind of intriguing. Not really something I had thought about before. Let's go and shrink the radius up, and I wonder how small we can go. Boom. Yeah, so that, see that broke out a big chunk, but the chunks inside of it are still, what am I trying to say? Do you see how these are still connected? So that's intriguing. And then I wonder if we could even make it so that this only exists for a single frame. So you can see it's going to be off, on, off. I just copied that frame over to the opposite side. So let's see. Oh, okay, it was too quick. That didn't count. So let's go ahead and give it 2 frames of living. Boom. Okay, that was a hit, but not quite enough. Now we can just grab these two and start scooting them apart until it's enough. Boom. Okay. Now, I bet you that even that 1 frame is enough if we make it bigger, but I don't want to go too overboard there. Boom. Like a big explosion there. So, interesting, interesting. Okay, so if this is our premise, let's just say I'm going to make a copy of that sphere. And that sphere is cool, but let's move it up and out of the way. Now we're going to take this one, and I'm going to stop keyframing it like that. So it's always going to be on. So my thought is what if we make it so that we are inside of a, would we make it a cloner? Yeah, I think we just make it a cloner. Put this in the cloner, and I'm going to tell the cloner that it's an object-based clone, and I'm going to drag in our Voronoi fracture. So now it's cloning all over the place, but it's cloning on the surface. But I'm going to say, you know what? I only want 1 clone. Now, a problem is that it's making 1 clone per object. 1 clone per object, that's definitely not what I want. I can't think of any way around that unless we put this entire thing into a connect object, which would force it to acknowledge it as a single object. Don't weld. We could still see the individual chunks, but now the cloner will view the connect object. Now there's a bunch of internal geometry, but the basic idea here being is as we change our random seed, you see how it's jumping around all over the place? Oh, actually, that's interesting. It seems to be, why is it, it's traveling in a very odd way. It seems almost like it's it seemed like it's really like any given seed is kind of preferring it. And I would think every time we hit randomize here, every time we hit seed, it's going to like pop into a completely different spot on one of the internal surfaces somewhere. But instead, it seems to have almost like this consistency, which is very strange to me. But the basic idea, would be for me creating it, and let's fast forward to the end, and then giving it some ridiculous keyframe. So now essentially every single frame it should be jumping from spot to spot to spot to spot. And let's just hit play and see what happens. boom, 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 boom. Yeah, you see it's jumping all over the place, and it almost immediately shatters everything. Boom, 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 boom. So the idea would be that we don't want it to actually jump of that often. Now, the easiest way to do this would be with Signal. Like I could do this super easy with like one click in Signal. But we need to, if we're not going to use Signal, then we need to step it. And I guess that's not too hard, but it's a little bit of a pain. If we go to like, let's say every 5 frames it should happen. So I'm just going to go 5 frames and record. 5 frames, record. And then keep in mind that it is still keyframes. So you can see it's every time I jump, it's automatically jumping a new time. But I'm just going to keep jumping every, and then this is very manual. Like I said, if we did this with Signal, it would be a very dynamic connection. Just another reason to use Signal from Grayscale Gorilla. Keyframe, keyframe. I'm going to go and meticulously do it on every one because these are pretty cool experiments. Boom, cool. And now if we select all of our keyframes, if I just select down here in this tiny little bar and hold down, yeah, if I do that and hit Control A, it'll actually select the entire timeline. And our interpolation, I'm going to say it's step. We almost never use step. Let's go ahead and actually take a look at what that's doing because it's pretty interesting. Let's go ahead and right click on our seed. I'm going to go animation F curve. And then now you can see that this is what's actually got keyframed. I'm going to hit the letter S. It's going to zoom up on all of it. Now, if we click step, and is there a button? Yeah, right here. So right now it's on like a spline-based one. And then we could do straight. So now it's like, you know, no interpolation. But we can click on step. What step does is says, like, stay low until you hit the next number. And then so it's like stepping from one setting to another. It couldn't be better named. It looks just like steps. So now every 5 frames, it's going to jump to a new seed. And it's still being pretty aggressive. But I'm thinking that might be because of the radius, or dynamics wise, it's traveling between the two, and then that would really be ripping it apart. Yeah, that seems to be existing while it's jumping from spot to spot, which makes me want to turn it off in between transitions. It's a little weird again. So let's see, we would say in the beginning it is off. So we're going to say boom. And then at 5 frames it is also off. But then if I go back 1 frame, it's on. And if we go back to 1 frame forward from nothing, it is also on. Now I lost a keyframe there. I don't know where or how, but I'm going to turn that off. So there you can see essentially what my loop is. And now I want that to loop. So I could just hold down Control, and this would, yeah, I want that to be 3, and then we could double that again, 3. There's a way of looping in the timeline. I just forget how to do it, but it doesn't take too long to keep on doubling this. Good enough. So now it should be off during the transition. Let's see if it does it a little bit more consistently. Okay, well, if nothing else, this is confirming to me my theory, which is Dynamics was seeing it on the in-between frames, and that was making it upset. So now I'm going to go ahead and increase the radius again. And boom, boom, boom. And you know what? That's not bad. This is honestly some of the best random breaking apart I've ever gotten. It's just like this little bit of force pushing them apart where it's suddenly like, hey, we're broken, but we're not like suddenly flying apart like with this tremendous energy. So, you know what? That's not bad. That's not bad. Now, there's a random element here where we don't know exactly where that's going to appear. It's pretty good, though. So let's go ahead and give ourselves some more frames. And then, you know, the basic idea goes to this should all be fine. And it's going to start breaking right away. But all the animation is on these 2 things. So I'm going to say, you know what? Don't do anything for about 50 frames. So nothing should happen for 50 frames. Now, of course, this is going to be all twitchy still. But if we zoom up, it's pretty good. And especially if we put this into the volume builder, then it actually does a great job of cleaning these up. But my basic thought here is, if we grab our Voronoi fracture in our dynamics, we turn on a custom initial velocity, and I'm not going to make it go crazy, but let's make it go like 500, and you know what? Let's give it some rotation. Why not? I don't know how much will make it go crazy, so let's just go easy on that and hit play. Yeah, so now you can see that it's got a little bit of something. So now it's floating. I'm pretty sure we can go at least 3 times the speed. So now there's our meteor. It's flying and tumbling through the air. And now we can let it go. And then at a certain point, right around now, it should start. Yeah, look at that. That is not bad. Now all the different pieces are getting slammed and broken apart. I guess one of those, I didn't like how much it flung it out. But it's going and then breaks, and it's breaking apart really well. I think it's just my time jump. Yeah, that actually did a fine job. And it honestly didn't even break apart as much as I would want it to. So we can, once again, increase the radius. And then just for fun, why don't we go ahead and grab our Voronoi fracture, and I'm going to feed it a tracer object. And the tracer is not going to trace vertices. It's just the individual lines. I'm going to limit it from the start. And we'll give it, I don't know, 10 frames. I'd always do it wrong from end. So now each individual chunk is getting traced. But now we should at least be able to see when the parts break apart, where we can see the individual little, like, tails. Well, big explosion on that last part, but we still have a bunch of bigger chunks. So, yeah, that's actually kind of fun. That's intriguing. So we get our initial velocity, and now it's jumping around, breaking the parts, but we still get our bigger chunk, and you can see it's maintaining its regular velocity really well. So yeah, the basic idea would be at this point, I mean, we wouldn't use the tracer, but if we were using X particles would be the logical thing. I mean, let's just be honest here. If we make a emitter, and then we tell the emitter to be an object, and if the object is probably this connect object, it can clone it to the polygon area. The display will be creating filled circles. Let's see. So yeah, now we got a bunch of these particles coming out. I'm gonna go ahead and make the radius real big. Let's see. I wanted to inherit the velocity, but we're going to put some drag on them. So we're gonna go X particles. There is no drag, right? That always throws me off. There is a drag. Okay, drag. So there's air drag. We'll put a force multiplier on it, but they should hopefully be taking on the velocity and then slowing down as they go. So that is all good. Let's go ahead and grab our emitter, and just for fun, let's go to display, and I'm going to say it's going to be a random color from a gradient, and let's go ahead and kind of pull in that teal color from the meteor I saw. A little bit more green, blue, saturated, a little more blue maybe. So we'll do that, and then we can go all the way to a green. So I'm just going to let these, I thought I said green. So I'm going to let it kind of randomly take colors from there, just so there's a little bit of variation. So now we can get all these particles coming off, and I'm going to say, okay, I don't want it to emit on the first frame. Emission, not the full lifespan. Oh wait, no, emit frame, start frame 1, full lifespan, no. Let's say they live for 90 frames. I don't know why those first ones are not getting any speed, but whatever. So these are flying, that's looking good. Let's go ahead and probably make a lot more particles. So on the particles, let's go ahead and set the radius down. Make the emission, I don't know, we can probably do quite a few. And I'd probably make they also have a speed. Speed is probably fine, but I want it to be, yeah, based on the normal. I'll set it origin. They're getting left behind, maybe based on the noise. I mean, that's really solid, but that's not necessarily wrong. Do they stop emitting at a certain point? Yeah, they do. Keep emitting. And let's give ourselves a couple more frames. Keep emitting. And then lifespan, let's give it a bunch of variation. Let's go 3 times as many particles. Let's make them smaller. Yay, X particles. I'm going to put more drag on. So it's air. I'm going to say they're traveling through water. Why not? Whoa, water is really strong. All right, we're going back to air, and we're going to make it 1,000%. Yeah, so there's just a lot more drag. So they're getting a mid at full speed, and then the tail is going to slow down behind them. That's about as long as I want them to live, so I'm going to shorten their lifespan to about 45 with a variation of 25. And we could probably even give it some speed variation, some scale variation would probably be fun. There we go, just a little more life in them. Whee! Okay, that's looking a little better. Now, I mean, I'm not going to take this to any kind of completion. Honestly, with us breaking those parts apart, that was the part I wanted. So, like, as they break apart, it'd be really cool if, like, when they break away, that they would go. But, man, actually, that's looking way cooler than I thought it would. Like, even right now, look at the awesome individual streaks as they break. Wow, I thought we'd have to work way harder on that, and that looks awesome. Let's see. It's already 4 o'clock. So we can probably sneak in one more question. I'm going to spend maybe another minute on this one. I don't want to spend too long on it because I think we already pulled out that really cool technique. In fact, I might want to pull that technique out and make a proper tutorial out of it at some point. But yeah, if we go ahead and put this material on there. I mean, it would probably just be even luminant there. I mean, in theory, there's just a rock, but yeah, letting all those particles drag out behind it. And then the sphere forcing its way into different sections here, which just forces them to fly apart. We have complete control over the way it's going to jump around via giving it different random seeds. If we wanted to be specific, we could probably feed in a couple of different ways of making that travel. You know, we could keep it, breaking other parts apart. We could try different random seeds in different spots. There's a lot of additional possibilities. Like I like the way this is going. I mean, we've got this one big chunk. It would have been cool if it broke into 2 in even parts. And along those lines, I mean, like I said, if we use signal, it could have been had a lot more control over like it bopping around all over the place. We haven't even saved this one yet. Meteor breakup. But having said that, if we do jump into our cloner and we say, let's go to animation and edit the F curve, it would be pretty easy to zoom out a little bit here. And if we don't like these seeds, honestly, all we have to do is grab these and then click on one and hold down shift as I travel upward. And now we've grabbed different random seeds. Those are different seeds. And then if we wanted to, I think we can, how do we draw a little box? There's a way of grabbing it and scaling it. We can also just select everything. And by selecting those, we have our key values. And the key values are different. But I could say, let me pull up so we can see it. If I put key value like x times 2, then we're not changing anything except making each seed jump double the amount that the previous one had. So we didn't change any of the timings. We just changed the way it's breaking. So we should have a completely different random seed setup now. So we should get a completely different breaking of the meteor. So let's see. Should start breaking right now. We got some pieces flying down this time instead of upward. Bigger chunk flying out there. Didn't break in half, sadly. But yeah, lots of pieces flew out downward. You know, it's actually I didn't even think about this, but there's another additional cool detail here, which is there's almost an equal and opposite reaction. Like as this travels, is traveling kind of in between. As pieces break off, this one is going to be more likely to travel upward because these pieces flew downward. So just by that sphere appearing for those couple frames, that is actually going to be another result of it. That's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and just do one more random seed. I don't want to spend any more time on it. And then we'll tackle one more quick question. So if you want to, if you guys want to throw in one more question in there now, I will tackle one of them if it doesn't seem too long. And what is it doing? Oh, F curve. So we're back to the F curve. I don't even need to do anything except select all these. I'm going to say X times 2 plus 555. Why not? So it's all going to get bigger and travel upward. So the seeds get completely random. Hopefully we're not traveling to the point where these seeds can no longer be handled. No, it's fine. These are big numbers, but they're working. So rewind, and I mean, just by changing that seed, it should be completely different. Just for fun, why don't we even grab our custom initial velocity, and I'm going to make it spin more. So let's go negative 1,200, and then we'll go negative 90 instead of positive. It should give us a completely different spin. So there we go. Flying around, doing a twirl, and then our sphere should start appearing. Come on, break in half. That'd be so cool. Got some big chunks going, but not the big one. Ooh, big chunk. Yeah. Oh, there we go. We got a good one. I think it's shattered into 3 big pieces. Let's see what we got. Yeah, look at that. There's even almost, so there's 3 big ones, one medium-ish, and a bunch of tiny ones. So that's a keeper. So yeah, each of those pieces doing its own thing, each independently tumbling and flying, doing its own rotation. So there we go. There's our meteor. I don't know of any way, in my head, I'm not thinking of any particular way where we would, where we could make some of these dissolve. I mean, we could make it so that there's a radius somewhere on the main path it's traveling, and then if they start falling away from the radius, they start shrinking more and more. As they start shrinking, they'll have less particles, and they kind of burn away that way. I think that would be a totally valid way of doing this. I mean, in fact, I guess as a final little part on this, and it will be the final part. Let's go ahead and try that for fun. I'm going to create a. No, I don't know if that would work. If we started shrinking the pieces individually, I think that would break them apart, and they'd all break. So let's test it. I don't know if it'll work or not. So the easy test is to grab a plane effector, and the plane effector is going to not move them upward, but scale them uniformly to -1, which is going to shrink them down to nothing. And now we're going to say that they're going to have a giant fall off. So I'm going to say, actually kind of curiously, if we go back here, yeah. So if we go to 0, they don't exist. So if we create a spherical fall off, I'm going to give it a full fall off, and we're going to make this a really big fall off. So it's 1,000, no, 10,000. So big fall off, and I'm going to, so right now it's full power in the middle. I want it full power on the outside, so we're going to invert it. So we're going to go remapping, invert. So it's at full strength there, and they should all be scaled normally. So are they going to immediately fly apart? Nope, they do seem stuck together still. And as it travels further, is it going to just automatically make them break? I'm going to turn off the cloner, in fact. So if they break apart, it's because of the shrinking. I'm not even sure if they are shrinking. I mean, what I would hope would happen, the ideal thing right now is they are all shrinking uniformly. And as they shrink uniformly, the cube is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. I don't think that's what's happening, because if it is what was happening, this entire thing should disappear by the time it gets to the exit. And that is clearly not what's happening. It still seems full-sized. So, thanks, spherical field. You did nothing. So, yeah. I don't know. It's just a variable. I don't know. So shrinking that didn't seem to work, unfortunately. Would have been cool. Okay. Well, I just want to watch this play through one more time, and then we will jump into the last question. Wee. There's probably other ways we could. I mean, there's definitely other ways we can shrink it, but especially once they start breaking away. One would be, I don't know, if I could trace like the center point of this, or like if we had something cloning onto the middle one, we could probably draw a tracer behind it and put a radius on that. If it gets outside the radius, it starts shrinking. Oh, I forgot to turn on the cloner again, so it wasn't breaking. I was like, I feel like it should have broken by now. Break. That's cool. I hope it does. It could be random, so the same might not get the exact same break a second time. Yeah, I think we already did all the breaks, and it didn't do the big multi-break that time. I didn't change anything about that, so I guess there's a lot of randomness in the system that I wouldn't necessarily trust. But yeah, it seems like we lost our big triple break, unfortunately. Yeah, nothing I changed should have affected that, and it's still staying together. I mean, it's breaking apart great. And of course, we could do things like increase the radius, and the bigger radius is more likely to break it apart in big ways. Right here is where you see the breaking happen. So if it hasn't broken apart by the end of this, then it's not going to. Break, break. Breaking lots of spots. Dang. Yeah, figuring out a consistent way to break it would be nice. And of course, the bigger the radius of the sphere that we feed through, the more it's going to fling the parts apart when they finally do break, because it's a pretty big sphere. You could even see it appear there for a second. Boom. Oh, there's a big one. The backside decided to utterly explode. I guess I hit a thick pocket of atmosphere. Anyway, I'll save the file there, and let's jump back into the chat. Yeah, so that one's Ben Affleck, definitely. Let's see. Argo. I like your question is just volumes question mark. Let's see. Let's go into. I had to copy the link, and let's paste it here. Paste it, I say. So, ew, gross. Latest research and developments in CGI techniques creating hypnotizing visual effects. This is from Bissus Production. Bissus Production. Bubbling in cut. Ooh. It says it's turbulence and X particles and Krakatoa and real flow. So, man, it looks cool and gross, but yeah, there's just a lot going on there. I got nothing. I mean, there's different noises that we could possibly be passing upwards and through, but I feel like there's just actually some real fluid simulations going here. You got all these different layers on top to make those travel. So that's pretty great and gross. But I said a quick one, and that is literally the opposite. Ben says Bissus is kiss in French. That's like the opposite of what they're showing there. But yeah, I guess their logo shows a little kissy lips. Cubic, what do you got? You got a link to Instagram. It's just a straight up link to Instagram, to the Motion Graphics Collective. So the Motion Graphics Collective is some sort of channel that like retweets. I don't know what the repost of Instagram is, where they kind of help people. So I want to make sure to go to the actual person who made it. So it's by this person. And how far back is it? There it is. Okay, so here's the actual one that they made. Oh, it's a whole city. Once again, this is the opposite of a quick one. It is cool, but like this is an entire rig. You know, I mean, the complexity here is spending a lot of time making it look nice, but like, you know, a really straightforward road here. This is just a single spline traveling around where all the cars can travel in the loop, and then that one's the same. A little cluster of city, all cloning onto that surface. Pretty straightforward. Clusters of trees, very nice. You got this flowing river, which just could be a looping part of a texture. So it just goes to like, you know, making one of these trees is an entire section. Making a rig where the cars are traveling around a sphere would be an entire section. The city is an entire section, so um, yeah. I like how it does look like a tennis ball, though. Who actually made it? It's a Agents Television. It is Cinema 4D. Do 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 do. Mm-mm-mm. Erica is asking what the download video link is. I'm not sure where you're seeing it, but I was trying to download this one clip for reference somewhere, and I just went to a Chrome extension and downloaded it. But I don't know where you're seeing it. Was it here? I don't remember. I don't know where you saw it, but yeah, there's a good chance I have a yeah. There's probably a download video here, but I haven't found. I think even the one I found wasn't working. The bottom left under the video. What video? Oh, download video? That's just on Instagram. It seems like I don't remember putting it there. I think you just can. Oh, I like the raptor. Cute. Um, Junior Clarkey is asking about this one. 50 minutes in. Bubbles. Raptor. Phil Mayer. A theatrical intro for View Cinemas. So let's see what we got. We got some crazy liquidy stuff going. You ask about 50 seconds in. We got a lot of fluids and liquid, which could just be shot. No, that's not shot. That looks like it's definitely CG. Yeah, okay, we're dealing with CG. But let's just go to here. So that's where it's all chill. And then we go. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, cool. So you're asking about these shock waves and then maybe these ripples traveling around. Yeah. Yeah. I can think of a series of ways we might explore something like that. Um, let's go ahead and just make these on the surface of a sphere so that we're a little bit different. And I'm going to go ahead and I guess I want more. I'll do icosahedron just so we get an interesting shape. Let's get some more polys going. We can go and make a cube. I'm going to make a bool. Let's feed both of these into the bool and say A subtract B. And then we're going to move the cube down so we get that kind of thing. Chopping it out. Actually, I'm going to change it to A without B, and that's just going to even be hollow. So now we just got this little bit of a surface up on top. Actually, I kind of want something like that. And now we can subdivide even more because we don't see that many polys. Cool. So that's what I'm going for. I'm just going to go ahead and say create single object, hide new edges, make editable. And now we just get our single object. Cool. So that is our geometry. So we want to keep this really low poly. So I'm going to make a very low poly sphere. Cloner, clone the sphere onto the bool. So we're going to set the cloner to object. Boom. And now it's already cloning onto the surface. We want vertex. So now we get that really neat looking pattern. But I want to make the bool a little bit bigger. T for scale. Make the bool bigger. And now I'm going to hit T for scale and scale our sphere down. Kind of split the difference there. So now we get a whole bunch of these eating up space. I guess the ones on this lip are going to be a little bit ugly. I'm going to ignore those. But otherwise, the layout's pretty nice. Okay, so let me think. What's a cool Voronoi type way of getting some shock waves? Not Voronoi. Why did I say Voronoi? A cool new fields type of way. I'm going to say plane effector, and then I'm going to make sure that the plane effector is not affecting the relative position, but affecting the transform space of the effector, so that pushes them all upward, not on their relative one, but on this one. Okay, cool. So now on here, if we were to make, let's say, a spherical fall off, now you can see that these are going to be what's affected. So if we were inclined, we could increase our size, and then, they'd all be kind of caught that way. But let's not use a spherical field. Let's spend a few minutes experimenting here. We probably need a seed of some sort, but Well, to tell you the truth, nothing is instantly coming to mind as a way of repeating the shock wave. I mean, we could do time and then loop if there's a big gradient, perhaps. Okay, we are going to make a spherical field. I am going to move the spherical field up here. I don't care about color. I'm going to set it to normal, and let's go ahead and go to remapping, full fall off, and let's grab our radius and make the radius so big it pretty much captures everything perfectly. So I don't want that end to move at all, but I want the beginning to move a lot. So there we go. It's capturing the entire area. What might be better is honestly, it might be better as a cylinder. So I'm going to click on the spherical field and change it to a cylinder. And now it's a cylinder, and now we can increase that radius, and now it's going to fall off in a more linear type way, and then give it full height. Cool, yeah. So now it's not dependent on the sphere's curvature. Okay, now that's a full fall off from 0 to 100. So my thought would be, can we loop? Is there a modulo? Range map, remap, maybe. So, if we create a time, and then we multiply or add, I would think add. If we add time, then they should all slowly get to their max value. But if we make, I don't know what remap does, but I'm going to try remap. Remap color. I don't want to remap the color. I want to do a modulo. Is there such a thing as a modulo? Not here. Modulo. Range map. Is there a loop on the range mapping? Formula. I guess formula almost automatically does it. But that's not what I want to do. I would love to control it via it viewing everything below, because there's subfields plus D, and D equals time times F, which is a frequency. I don't want any of that. We just want kind of the subfields. I wonder if that's even a thing. Subfields unclamped. If we just say subfields, it's just seeing everything below it. Cool. Now I want to modulo it. So I'm going to type in mod bracket subfields colon or semicolon. I don't remember which. I'm going to say 1 close bracket. Let's try semicolon. There we go. There we go. Okay. Now, I'm using formula in the simplest way possible, so I don't want anybody to be intimidated by it. The basic idea here is I'm feeding it the subfields. So it's just saying, hey, I'm whatever is below. But I'm feeding it a modulo, and modulo is a very, very useful mathematical kind of term. So you probably know what clamp is, where clamp is like, okay, you have a value between 0 and 1, and you're clamping it. So it can't go below 0, and it can't go above 1. Well, what this modulo is saying right now is if you go above 1, reset back to 0. So I'm just looping around again and again and again. If I were to change this modulo to 2, then now it can travel up to 2 before it loops back down to 0. But I'm saying 1. So that is our way of looping that around. Now you'll see that our time is constantly pushing it upward. And we've got a range mapper. That's actually not doing us any good. But what we could probably do is take our... Can we take time and remap it with a curve? I'm not sure. I'm going to make a curve under here. And I'm going to make an arc like that. Is it going to do anything? Whoa. Boom. And it stops because it's going back down to 0, so it's never moduloing. So it just needs to continually go upward. Interesting. So it goes up and then forces its way all the way down again, but just does a harsh reset. I mean, I'd really love to build this as a rig instead of just using the formula. So as it's hitting it, it jumps down to 0. I don't want to jump down to 0. Now, we could use some smoothing as a way of transitioning between them, but I don't like that. I mean, we could. It wouldn't be bad. Oh, interesting. Okay, well, you know what? Like, I'm going to temporarily turn that off because I just noticed time can also be treated like a sine wave. So you can see it's actually looping the time. Which is cool. I didn't know it did that. So it's kind of giving us a forward and backward I wanted. I'm not sure any of this makes sense. I mean, that's weird. But I want it to. I want to continuously add. I mean, I think it does have to just be none, and it keeps on adding as you get taller and taller and taller. That should be. Oh yeah, it's still on multiply. It's like, why is it doing that? That would be more of the shock wave around and around. Unless the curve comes afterward. Okay, you saw how I made the curve, and I didn't. I had it in the wrong place. I didn't know I had it in the wrong place. I thought I had it in the right place. But after the formula, then it's remapping the formula. So now this is already too complicated of a rig. Probably the cylindrical fall off is just giving us how the points are going to be distributed, and then the time is continually pushing everything upward. The formula is saying once you get to the top, go back down to the bottom. But then the curvature is saying that the bottom is the same as the top via remapping this. So now we get this loop. So based on that, we could increase. Now we have time variable, and we could increase the time. So now it takes, well, by increasing the time, oh, it's one of those ones that's reversed. So if we double the time, it goes half the speed. So if we go 3 times the speed, now it's traveling along there quicker. We have the formula, which is saying loop every 1. But if we had it loop every 0.5, then we should get double the loops. Now the time is way too quick. But now we should have 2 rings traveling every time. The remap doesn't seem to be able to handle that. So it looks like the curvature needs to double with every formula. Which does make me think that the curve would come before it, but then we saw that that did not work. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm intentionally making this more complicated because I thought there were some cool little potential educational moments in there, and instead I'm making it so complicated that even I'm having trouble following exactly what we're doing. Like this kind of looping here makes sense to me, where it's like we're telling it to travel back down, and now with the formula, every time I increase this, we're going to get more subdivisions that go less high. So that makes sense to me. Now, these are snapping, but if we were to create a, where do they hide them? A delay effector, and we have smoothing there. Now you can see how we're getting this more controlled ripple as it travels from one side to the other. We could also say linear. It's going to make that a little bit more linear. Shocking, I know. And then spring's always fun. Spring's actually looking the best, surprisingly. So yeah, now there's this really fun repeating shockwave where every point is just traveling up and down, up and down. If we made our cylinder a little smaller, I don't think the outside would ever move. Oh no, it's linearly adding. Yeah, it's stuff combined in such interesting ways. Because right now time is being added to the system, but if time was multiplied by the system, then this middle part is going to start out slow and then ripple and ripple again and ripple again and ripple again, and suddenly there's going to be tons and tons and tons of ripples in there. So the difference between add and multiply is immense. Subtract should be a very similar effect, except it's going to be doing the opposite and traveling downward, I guess. Pretty cool looking. I like the way it's like revealing up through the surface. Not intentional, but neat looking. you know what's funny is there's probably a completely unrelated system we could do um, that would use none of these same nodes. That would probably achieve a very similar effect. Now, yeah, look at this one. Like this one is going to make the ripple travel back and forth, because we told the sine wave to go back and forth. This one's going to be continuously additive. A very important variable here is if you're trying to make it, you got to make sure you've turned off your clamping. Otherwise, it can't travel below one. It can't travel below 0 or above 100. So we want to definitely unclamp that. Boom, boom, boom. So yeah, if the time is subtracting, it travels from the outside in, and if it's adding, it's going from the inside out. That's pretty cool. Oh man, the stuff combines in so many crazy cool ways. I mean, there's even a good chance that we could just feed, like we had the formula effector. I think the formula effector does a lot of work here. Yeah, I turned those off. In fact, why don't we turn those on and save it? Because this is neat. I don't know if it's super useful, but it's neat. Oops. That's not the meteor. Ripples. Okay, so that is doing that thing. Now, if we were to kill those off and make a brand new formula, there's a good chance that we could just like feed the subfields through a sine wave. Yes, because this, yeah. If we feed this through a sine wave, oh, interesting. Oops, is it the sine of the subfields? But the subfields should be continuously increasing. Well, that's not at all what I thought would happen. Sine wave. Oh, well, we do have double x or double. That's sort of more than I thought it. That's sort of more what I was expecting. Not really. Why is this? Okay, subfields plus d is time. The subfield should already have time applied. Okay, so this is traveling upward just because of time, but the sine wave is not getting anywhere. Times 10 times 100 times 1,000. And at this point, I'm just tinkering. Like I'm even doing guessing checks. I'm not even like intentionally making things happen. I'm a little thrown off by. I thought this would do something. I mean, there's definitely some sort of tiny movement, but I thought if you fed a sine wave, a subfield through time. No, maybe this needs to be multiplied. Put that times 10. Yes. Okay, there we go. There we go. That's what I was trying to do with the other ones. I wasn't seeing any effect. Yes. Okay. So now, yes, now the fall off. What's happening here is the subfield is feeding out essentially 0 to 1, but time is constantly increasing. But this is saying it should have way bigger effects. So it's not 1 to 0, it's 1, or it's 0 to 1, but now I'm saying it's 0 to 200 because it goes up to times 200. And now the sine wave is making it loop. The sine wave is almost like a modulo, except it loops softly up and down. So now that's creating a loop based on what we're feeding it below. So if we turn off time, it's going to be static, but this means that we have complete control over the way this is falling off based on the cylindrical field that we're feeding it. So what's cool there is we could remap things. Like we could go and feed a curve, and now the way this is laid out should be dramatically different. Like if we curve this in differently, the speed it travels should be significantly different. Yeah, you can see where it's mirroring this shape in what we've got here, constantly offset in time. Makes sense to me anyway. That part does. It's cool. Now, if we wanted to double, I mean, some of this just goes to the formula effector, and the formula effector does cool stuff. If we said times 2, Does that, okay, times 2. Here's our speed. So this is a speed multiplier. So it's how much is it going to go faster. And then there's also, there would be some variable we could do which would make this loop around more times. I would like to do that via it being fed more loops. Like our cylindrical field, I don't think there's a way of doubling it. I mean, you could remap it to be times 2. I don't think that actually makes sense, though. Okay, everybody. This is just math. Indeed, it's fun, but it doesn't make for very interesting viewing, I think. Well, that's not true. It could be really fun. I like it. I would totally watch somebody, but I don't want to just fumble through here while you're watching. So we already, oh man, we're almost 40 minutes over. So yeah, almost 3 hour live stream. So I'm feeling okay about that one. Give that one another save. Why not? And yeah, let's go back to the screen. Let's see. Wrap this one up. Thanks everybody for coming and hanging out and doing the asking questions. I couldn't do it without your questions. We'll be back next week, of course, with another episode of this. Tomorrow there'll be an episode of the Off the Record, which is more a bigger project-based ones. We're tinkering with sand and small granular things right now. I'm actually not entirely sure what we're going to do tomorrow with it. I got to think about that. Another reminder, there's a cool challenge happening right now in the Slack channel, so make sure you head to rocketlassoslack.com in order to get to the Slack channel and join into that the new challenge. I think it's going to be really fun. It's a really good one. And then I'm gonna pop open that commercial one more time because why not? This isn't even live yet. I'm just gonna show it to you again in the viewport. So if you didn't catch it earlier, this is an experimental animation I'm working on for Patreon. It's not quite done, so you're getting to see an early version of it. So let's jump over here, and this is just playing in the viewport, so it's not. It might lag a little bit at the end. Yay! It's fun. I like that kind of stuff. And of course, I made that in Cinema 4D instead of After Effects because I know Cinema 4D really well, and I was able to put that together in kind of one night and then spend part of the next day polishing. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for the support on Patreon. Thanks for coming and hanging out and asking questions. Otherwise, we couldn't do this. And it also exposes me to a bunch of really cool work I wouldn't know otherwise. So I'm going to officially say goodbye. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out. And I'll see you in the Slack channel. And I'll see you on the next episode of Rocket Lasso Live. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye. 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 Bye-bye.